Want one or need one either. They're happy. They think they have a good bead on things.
Well, why the big secret? People are smart. They can handle it.
A person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it. 1,500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was flat. And 15 minutes ago, you knew that people were alone on this planet.
Imagine what you'll know tomorrow.
And, you know, you said, you know, you're looking into flat Earth and, you know, not a flat earther, and that's fine. But I'm just curious, you know, that's as soon as
I find it intriguing. I haven't really studied it.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that I do, especially when I'm talking to people about, you know, flat Earth or trying to get them introduced to it. One of the first places I go, because this is how I came into it, was, you know, I was a big believer in NASA and Richard Hoagland, and yeah, there must be a secret space program because I just know there's aliens out there, and the government's trying to hide them from us and not let us know, and all this stuff. I mean, I was so into that, but I was looking at all of the NASA stuff going, why is this all so fake? Why is it fake? But again, also believing that it's because whatever is really out there in space is too horrific for us to really know, or they just, you know, they can't let us know that. But then when I started looking at flat Earth, and then you look back and you think, wow, I wonder if that's why NASA is faking all this. Because again, if any of it was real at all, even if there were, you know, a whole, you know, tons of civilizations of aliens running around out there and stuff, why wouldn't NASA at least augment some of or supplement some of their stuff with, you know, real space footage? But they never did. So, you know, that's when it became very clear to me, because now I just ask people, look, obviously this is fake. You can tell this is fake, and you have to ask yourself that question. Why are they faking any of it, let alone all of it, right? And that's the amazing part. You start looking at this, and NASA not only admits that they have no real photographs of Earth, they're all composites. Everything is shot, and it's ridiculously into the cartoon, you know, realm, for sure. Absolutely. And you just have to ask yourself, why? Why would they do this? Unless, you know, what is it that they're hiding? And I think that, you know, flat Earth combined with the rest of the voluminous preponderance of evidence that tells us that we're on a motionless, non-spinning plane, I think it's, you know, it's a good question, a good way to start people out and looking at this.
If your grandfather made a fuel bracket for the Saturn V, if you watched it on TV or saw it in a newspaper or heard about it at school, well, they have your buy-in. And if you saw it in person, well, how can you be any more emotionally invested than that? You saw Apollo launch. Your great-uncle was part of the satellite station tracking at Goldstone. Your cousin's best friend's sister's nanny used to eat at a restaurant where a guy who once worked in Mission Control used to eat.
Engine ready, light on. 10.
The only limit to a human future is in our own imagination. Is in our own imaginations.
Is in our own imaginations. Is in our own imaginations. Is in our own imaginations.
Whoa. Watch out for that curve. This is the problem that I've seen just recently, even more and more, is that these people who are smart or who are educated or who have degrees in that department, that what that does is it essentially blinds you. It's not what we think. We think that, you know, somebody who's in the astrophysics community is a more skeptical astrophysicist, or they look into the things more deeper. But what actually is the truth is they look into it less. And so these people that are engineers, they don't look into these engineering problems with more of a scrutiny or where more of a skeptic's eye. They actually are just more accepting of people in their co-field. So it becomes a problem. And that's why when people ask me, you know, where's your credentials? Really, people need to understand that it's kind of good that we don't have them, because you have to have sometimes that outside eye, because believe me, Brian Cox and Neil deGrasse, these guys are just going to go through the motions. They'll never see fraud if it's right in front of their noses, because it means they have to call into question their entire life's work, and just nobody's going to do that. And so same thing with Destin. I mean, I think he was in aeronautics. I'm not sure exactly what department he was, but I mean, it's just, he's going to see something like that. He's never going to question it. Like, is this real? Could they be faking me? I mean, that's the last thing any astrophysicist even thinks about when they look at any kind of a space launch or a rocket launch. They are about everything but looking at it with a skeptic's eye. And I love Hollis. Hollis has a couple letters, open letters to Brian Cox, which is he's supposed to be this public scientific educator who's never answered these open letters, and it's because it calls into question his entire job, his entire career. But even he says that it's a moot point. There's no reason to argue it. Of course we went to the moon. It's like asking if we discovered America or if we discovered penicillin. And once somebody's gone to that level of completely shutting their eyes to evidence, then they're not scientists anymore. They're not investigators. They're not researchers. And really, they shouldn't be included in our conversations, because you can't communicate with somebody who's already made that concession that everything that NASA has said must be true and you must be a kook. That's how they look at us. And so we just have to move past them, I think. You're never going to get anywhere because they don't want to see the truth. They love to lie.
Yeah, amen to that.
The observers come in now with the belief that we live in a Big Bang universe, and therefore all of their ways of understanding things are tailored to that. And they don't come in with the possibility that our alternative, or any other for that matter, is right, and really do it in an open-minded way. And of course what goes along with that is that observers who would like to test this way find it very hard to get observing time and so on. I mean, this relates to the whole issue of the complete lack of balance in the way the observational programs and the funding are conducted. There's no question about that. I don't think that anybody would argue about it.
I'm a visualization scientist. I basically try to come up with ways of explaining complex science stories through the visuals and developing artwork and illustrations that actually can help explain the science story to people.
And about 100 years ago, almost everybody in astronomy, without question, assumed that the whole of the universe was what you could see in the Milky Way. Nobody felt that the universe was any bigger than the stars that you see in the sky.
For decades, popular culture and shows like Star Trek inspired a generation of scientists by envisioning what space might look like. But wait, what does space actually look like?
Totally glitching. The car's not glitching out, it's just the Earth. And then they cut the feed. Oh shit.
Heart nebulas, celestial collisions, a bird's eye view of the Milky Way, astronomers are charting the outer reaches of the cosmos and bringing back jaw-dropping images from telescopes like Hubble and its infrared cousin Spitzer.
My institute, saying that unless I changed my line of research, that they would have to take away my telescope time.
If you look down at the bottom of that Milky Way image, you'll see these two words: artist concept. This sweeping image of the Orion Nebula actually looks like this.
There's a large body of work going on, observational work, theoretical work, which is based on the assumption that quasars are at their cosmological distances. If it turns out seriously that we're right, then all that work is in vain. We don't know anything like as much as we think we do by saying that the quasars are far away. And that's another huge problem for people to face up to.
And the TRAPPIST-1 star system, the latest discovery of 7 potentially habitable exoplanets that made national headlines, it's really only a box of gray and white pixels.
The Big Bang theory assumes that redshift is an indicator of distance, which would put this galaxy at about 11 billion light years away. If it's that far away, it's therefore large and bright. But modern astronomy dismissed the observations of many astronomers in the last half of the 20th century, astronomers like Halton Arp and the Burbages. They found that high redshift objects tend to cluster around nearby low redshift objects. They found many physical connections, and they even found some high redshift objects in front of low redshift objects. These observations were misrepresented, and the misrepresentations were disproved. So with that excuse, the observations were dismissed and the Big Bang theory was saved. This is kind of a new scientific method. Instead of observation theory and testing, the data is judged by its conformity with belief. If it doesn't conform, then there's something wrong with the data, and the data is dismissed. In this case, fervency of belief replaces testing. If redshift is not proportional to distance, then the universe is not expanding and there's no Big Bang.
You see, space art is part of NASA, and it has been since before we went to the moon.
Image has been viewed by millions of people a year over the last 45 years. It's up on walls, probably 10 or 12 feet high. It's photographed in books and magazines and everywhere else. And of course, it's the American symbol as well, your very reverent symbol. And everybody that has analyzed and studied this photo in any way, shape, or form has never looked at it and seen that it's wet.
Yeah.
It quite clearly is.
That is amazing, because it absolutely is. You can see along here where the arrows are, the line between the dry and the wet part of the flag, and of course it's very obvious over here. It's even crinkled up, almost like it just came out of a washing machine or a rainstorm.
It's in the red and white as well. It's harder to see.
Mm-hmm.
If you see almost in the center, in the close-up part there, on the first full band down, just the bottom half of the red is actually water as well on that. Right in that section there.
There and here, yep.
Yeah, you can see it if you study it. The harder you study it, the more you see it. And of course, when you realize that it's wet, and it was raining, the entire set is wet.
Most space imagery begins with data. Very, very complex data.
Dr. Anthony Peratt, a plasma physicist, and he was a protege of Hans Alfvén, the famous Nobel laureate. And Peratt studied plasma formations in the laboratory for many years. And what he did was create what are called particle and cell animations on supercomputers. Galaxies are, rather than being condensations of gas and dust that are gravitationally bound together, were actually plasma formations. And he thought that these simulations showed that cosmic plasma is confined due to self-consistent magnetic fields. And these magnetic fields are induced by currents that are flowing through the plasma, creating filamentary structures. And a cross-section through these filamentary structures indicated the formation of several galaxy configurations, and among those configurations were elliptical and barred spiral shapes. So Peratt insisted that plasma, along with electricity, engenders the structures in the universe. And since galaxies are often strung like pearls through space, or like beads on a string, that galactic arrangement lends credence to that idea.
And transforming these numbers and graphs into an image that captures the public's imagination requires a delicate balance between science and art.
There's a very interesting galaxy known as NGC 7603. It's a Seyfert galaxy. That means it has one of these active nuclei with strong emission lines and a lot of activity, obviously, going on in its center. And it was studied years ago by Chip Arp in his Atlas of Peculiar Galaxies. It has a spiral arm that seems to come right outside of the galaxy, trailing right out, and it ends up on a fainter galaxy, but it ends right up so it's connected the nuclei of the two galaxies.
And that is where Robert comes in. As an astronomer and artist, Robert isn't editing images so much as he's making an artistic hypothesis grounded in facts, so we can visualize what's really happening up there.
One of the best and earliest of the really controversial things was a Seyfert galaxy known as NGC 4319, which Chip Arp discovered that it has a protrusion coming out in the south direction from it, one of its spiral arms, and ending up on another galaxy known as Markarian, and people have tried to explain it away in all kinds of ways, and then tried to take false pictures to show that it's not there. But I've seen the good pictures, which were the first really good pictures were taken by Jack Solentic.
And for objects we haven't even seen yet, like TRAPPIST-1, the artist rendition is a meticulous process.
Suddenly there appeared press releases from Space Telescope Science Institute, which was the research arm of NASA's Hubble Space Telescope. And this press release said that they were not connected, and it gave a Hubble Space Telescope picture. It was not very deep, and you could just see two objects and no connection between them. And in this press release, then they said that that this proved that there was no contradiction with the current expanding universe paradigm.
No connection between the two objects. So I looked at their picture, then I downloaded it, and it took me 5 minutes to show that it's still there. Now, I don't know what it is, but I think you face up to the existence of the feature, and then you consider conventional and unconventional explanations. But I was really surprised that they felt it necessary to issue a press release saying, it's not there, it's not real. When it's the same thing we saw 20 years ago.
But it's hard to get people to look at this because they don't understand it. You see, it's again the non-cosmological redshifts.
Once a result shows up, the first thing I'll do is get a copy of the paper and look over it. I just want to understand what is actually being presented as peer-reviewed science. Then usually the next step is to contact the scientists involved in the research directly and discuss with them how we might go about illustrating their result.
We realized that that the people who had been processing the pictures and released it must have known that the bridge was there, and yet they chose to try to convince the public that in fact it wasn't there, and that everything was right with the current expanding universe paradigm.
It's a strange attitude. I don't understand it as a scientist, really. I think that news release could have generated much more interest in astronomy than many of the more conventional news releases, because people would be talking amongst themselves, gee, what could that be? And then various people could offer scientific explanations. But to just sort of close the door, in a way you could argue that Chip, or someone like Chip, who believes in an alternate interpretation, I'm sitting in the middle of the bridge, so it could be either way, he should feel strong, because I interpret that as a manifestation of fear and uncertainty. Because if I really had confidence in my paradigm, I'd put it right out there and say, well, yes, there is a bridge there, but it's either this explanation or it's that explanation, but certainly it's not what your herb says. But instead to just say it isn't there, that's a manifestation of fear, I think.
The first day I saw the data plot of the light curve from the TRAPPIST-1 star, my jaw dropped, because it was just a forest of deep dips in the light curve, and we knew there was a whole flurry of activity.
NGC 7603 is a very special case of this correlation. You find not only three objects with different redshifts in the neighborhood of a major safer galaxy. You also find the filament connecting all of them. So this is more important because the probability to have all these objects, not only in the neighborhood, but exactly in the filament is extremely low.
The galaxy, which is an active galaxy, two low redshift quasars, and another galaxy with twice the redshifts. In other words, you had four objects all connected together, apparently, by a luminosity, by a luminous bridge, each with a different redshift. Now that, I would say, is pretty conclusive evidence for the existence of non-cosmological redshifts.
Data doesn't look like much to the untrained eye, but the depth of the dip reveals the size of the planet. And by studying tiny blips of light as the planets pass the star, otherwise known as the transit method, astronomers can tell that the exoplanets orbit close to their star. All of this information is critical so Robert can paint the right picture.
When I was director of the National Observatory 20 years ago, there was a very well-known astronomer now. In fact, she's just won the Cosmology Prize. That's Vera Rubin. She was carrying out a program at Kitt Peak at the National Observatory of observing faint spiral galaxies with a view to looking to their redshift distribution, or their velocity distribution. And this was a program that everybody thought was a good program. And so she'd been given observing time, and at the end of about a year, she had completed about a third of her program. And so she actually wrote a little paper pointing out that she was getting results very different from the ones that were expected. And we had our usual meeting. And when we got to her program, which was an ongoing program, so people just looked it over, the leading extragalactic astronomer on my committee that day immediately said, well, look, she's getting this result. It doesn't fit. It has to be wrong. I recommend that we stop the program. That was his position. And what was interesting to me was I sat there and listened to this discussion. And the majority of the people, because of his level of knowledge and authority, went along with him. So the recommendation of the committee was that we stop the program. Well, I had the last word, so I ignored it, but most people don't. And the peer review system and NASA itself, which is very conformist, will always do just that. That's one of the reasons why the road ahead is hammered out. As Hoyle said, anytime you point a new telescope at the sky now, you're only going to find what you already know is up there.
To tell a big story like TRAPPIST-1, Robert takes the scientific limitations seriously because the wrong color could be very misleading. The wrong color could be very misleading.
Hidden in Greenland? Let's do some Luciferian color theory.
Rendering an exoplanet with bright green continents would be kind of crossing a line for us. We don't want to say, hey, we found life on this planet, and showing green really would communicate that. It's enough to show some evidence of water. In fact, a lot of times we've made special efforts to make the water not look super appealing, not like this tropical deep blue appearance, because you would think that complete accuracy would be the goal when you're doing astronomical illustrations, but it isn't always the case. The primary goal is communication and understanding.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Then
there was another layer to sort of simulate the atmosphere.
And then there's this little bright spot.
It's called the specular highlight. So it's the reflection of sunlight off of water.
Those are the pieces, but you can't just slap them all together.
It just didn't look realistic. It looks kind of flat, looks kind of flat, looks kind of flat, or the clouds are sort of too see-through. So I just hit Command Z a lot.
There's artistry to creating the world.
What I imagine it to be.
Communicating space discoveries with art has a long and storied history. One of the fathers of modern space art was the famed Chesley Bonestell, a designer and illustrator. In the 1950s, he created an image of Saturn's moon Titan before Neil Armstrong had ever taken his first steps on the lunar surface. Carl Sagan once famously said of Chesley, "I didn't know what other worlds looked like until I saw Bonestell's paintings."
Those two there, one showing mold. On the left-hand side of that, where the left arrow is, you can see where it's like it's foil, so everything is wrinkled except that one spot there. It's absolutely perfectly flat, so there's water lying in it. And then on the other arrow, you can see where the water is dried back. There's actually green mold around the outside of it, and the mud's caked onto it. And that's exactly what happens when water evaporates. Those aren't little pictures. Those aren't even blown up. Those are the actual pictures, the way they are. And I don't know why anybody looking through there couldn't see that. I mean, if you take a piece of tinfoil and rip it off and set it on your barbecue and take a picture of it, it's going to look pretty clean. And that's exactly what they were doing. When they set this equipment up, they took the photograph right away of it. It's not like it was laying around. And this stuff was supposed to be prepared in a clean room.
Yeah, now this to me looks like, you've got like leftovers from water here. You see this? Looks like
it's so wet.
Yeah.
It's so if you look at the backdrop, the so-called mountain in this, when you're going through the Apollo 17 photos, as the ground in front dries out, then it starts to match the backdrop. So when you go back two or three magazines further on, they'll match up in color.
Yeah.
But when
this is so blatantly different.
Darker in color, and that's why the footprints are so much darker as well. And it's the same as if you were walking in sand or anything else, right?
Yeah.
Or any dirt, when you kick it up, it's darker underneath as it starts to dry on top.
Yeah.
That particular photograph, they must have been shooting quite a few golf balls around, because there's quite a number of them out there on that set.
His work was so widely acclaimed that his illustrations accompanied articles written by German rocket scientist Wernher von Braun, which ultimately inspired the American space program.
Now a look at a moment when national security interests trumped ethical concerns. Jeffrey Brown has our book conversation.
Nazi scientists, some of them tied to war crimes including horrific concentration camp experiments, brought to the U.S. in a secret program to advance American security interests during the Cold War. It sounds like the plot of a film drama, but it actually happened, and on a large scale. The story is told in the new book, Operation Paperclip. Author and journalist Annie Jacobson joins us now. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
Many of the things that seem impossible now will become realities tomorrow.
Having a visual response to technical triumphs was something NASA latched onto early on. For over 50 years, NASA worked closely with artists and creative leaders like Walt Disney and Norman Rockwell to help shape the stories of spaceflight.
Did you catch it? Let's watch again.
The Deep Space Network's 3 stations cover the whole sky. Any mission more than...
Now the scene that we're interested in is right here. And if you look behind the sky, you can see on the board we have Disney's Cinderella Castle. Now I caught this not 10 minutes ago on a Dreads Hangout on You've Been Exposed. If you haven't checked it out, I'm going to put a link in the description. Big shout out to him. I think it was a Globehead that played this on his Hangout, and the moment I saw it, it just blew me away. I mean, we already know the connections between Disney and NASA, right? We know all of this stuff is fake. It's all done in the studio. And a lot of these symbols and signs that they put out in the media for us to see, there are many reasons for them. Some people will say it's there to mock us, yeah, but there are other reasons. The truth, they have to put it out there in one form or the other, right? It's always out there, and this is one of the reasons. They're showing us, they're telling us that this whole space thing is nothing but a movie. It's all Hollywood, and most of us already know this.
It's the same legacy today, just with more advanced scientific understanding and better tools to imagine what far-off worlds might look like if we could visit them.
A technical tale, which is really, this is something to paying attention, because it's a technical tale. It's not like a fantasy only. It's with the purpose of the book is like adoctrinated via technology what's going on Mars, or the technology to arrive Mars, but something that is really, really that little things that call the attention. There is a president, a guy who is going to be the president of the government, Martian thing. And you know what is the name?
Yes,
it's Elon.
Yes, Elon. Yep.
It's Elon, exactly. It's in the page here, 166, 76. This is the guy. The Martian government was directed by the man. The leader of the one was elected by universal suffrage for 5 years and entitled Elon. So what? That it's impossible. That's
that's so impossible.
Elon Musk. Like the mask of Elon, and the book. 40 years before, there's gonna be a president on Mars called Elon.
Yeah.
It's a show.
Yeah, I mean, who writes this stuff? Obviously, somebody does, right?
Yes. I like how they call it a technical tale, where in other stories it would be a fairy tale.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's more like a technical script, I think, is what they're really trying to say. I mean, and it's amazing. You know, when you look at some of the names, and Eero, you pointed this out so many times, you know, about people's names and how they are so, you know, perfectly matched to what they're doing, right? And it's absolutely predictive. You're right.
Exactly.
We want to take a lot of care to make sure we don't oversell the part of the story that isn't actually the story.
But for example, 3 years ago, this is from a video of Oliver Ibáñez, who is a flat earther from Spain. And he pointed out that 3 years, exactly 3 years before the 6th of February, but 2015, this guy made the heavy metal landing recreation, which is this one. You can see it on YouTube.
Oh, interesting.
But you know what? This is the intro. This is the heavy metal remake. I am showing, scrolling the timeline in After Effects, so that is why you see a little splotchy. But the real thing is this guy who made this video work in NASA. For example, you can see here, artist and animator on NASA from the 1999 to the present. You know?
Wow.
So all these guys are inside there. He was, for example, an art director by Sega, game console. So this is the web page of the guy. If you look the YouTube channel, you're gonna see the name. If you make some research, you're gonna jump to the portfolio web page, and he used, for example, Motion Builder.
There are people who just look and think, oh, NASA's photographed a planet, and they don't understand that actually that was a piece of art. On the other hand, if we don't do that and we don't put a piece of compelling artwork, then people may never even look at the story anyway.
They dock again.
Oh no, it looked like it was docking, but then it started to fall off.
Apollo Houston, it was a beautiful docking. We had a good picture. We can see Italy coming up in the Mediterranean right now.
Oh, never mind. I guess it's all good now. So we can watch more of these miniature models in a black warehouse. Or do some of you still believe in magic? Do you really believe this is in space? Do you trust these men that much?
After some 3 hours, the two spacecraft separate for the last time, and Apollo maneuvers into position for the final joint experiment.
Wait a second. Why does the craft easing away look identical to the craft arriving earlier? Well, that's easy. Put them together, and it's clear. They're just playing the miniature model video in reverse. You can even see where the Earth goes in one direction, and then it is simply played in reverse and the Earth goes the other way. These kind of tricks worked in the 70s. Now why do we still allow them today? Why can't we call out fake what is clearly fake? Why are we so afraid of what others think when you can just watch what they are showing you and clearly say fake?
On the other hand, if we don't do that and we don't put a piece of compelling artwork, then people may never even look at the story anyway.
Look carefully at the stick in front of the Soyuz here. See it there? This, folks, is an obvious fraud. But to be smart in this world, you better believe in magic.
It is the first such measurement by this method. The results have given investigators a clearer knowledge of outer atmospheric makeup, including the quantities of ozone in the upper atmosphere.
They give you no choice to trust your eyes or to trust evidence or your senses. Nope, you better believe in space or you're a moron, an uneducated fool. Because men say this is real, and what do you know? You're not capable of determining real from fake. You've got no right questioning a place you've never seen or never been.
Not since the first landing on the moon 6 years earlier has the Houston News Center seen this much press activity.
You better also believe that the Houston news desk was so busy that this guy had to talk on 2 phones. That's crazy busy.
We're putting as much science as we can of where we know today. And I like to think that in 50 years, when people come back and look at, say, the various pictures of exoplanets after maybe we actually finally know what they look like, they might wink and smile to each other like, oh, that's so funny. And they thought there was water on that one.
So here we are back at the flag again. Of course, this is very, very apparent that it's wet, especially along the top. You can see it running down here.
Yeah, just through this over and over again, that just seems to be, it was just such a blatant, a piece of evidence that we decided, let's put this in every video, at least one shot of it, just to remind folks that, this is almost blatant. Anybody
mist
all should have been pulled out. There's no way that this stuff should be even existing like we talked about.
And somebody told me it was dust blowing in the wind, that it wasn't moisture. And I said, it doesn't matter which it is. It can't be there.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
No, absolutely should not be there.
Can't be there. Yeah, and like these are just going through the various shots where there is water to be seen, right? And once you see, like, there's not just one or two photos in each one. There's a whole series of them, right? And you can just, like, there's thousands of photos to go through, right? Each one has its own story to tell.
Yeah.
You put them all together, you got a big book.
Yeah. You know what they say, space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Flagstaff landfill.
Yes. In this particular picture, buried in the report server of NASA, when I was reading through the many thousands and thousands of PDFs, pressure test done on the CSM blew that window out. And you can see that they just duct taped it back together. They put a rain guard on it. That rain guard is broken. And of course the seal's gone because the water is in between the two layers of glass, and it's been in there long enough to peel the paint up.
Duct tape fixes anything.
The official version of that photograph with the water running down in zero gravity, of course, is halfway to the moon.
Yeah.
Okay, it's minus 250 outside and the water doesn't freeze.
Magic.
Magic.
Amazing.
Oh, that's so funny. They thought there was water on that one.
Like I said, a lot of these things are pretty unmistakable. Like when the lady saw the Coke bottle, for one. I thought what was interesting was like the footage of the cars and the old, 58 or 57 Corvette, that you can see very clearly the front grille part of that, and then the back end of it, which has a very distinct line to it, that would appear to be buried under the sun. I think Paul's probably going to pull this one up. I mean, I looked at that and went, wow, that's incredible. And initially, I didn't see it, but then, this is the one that's way in the background.
I like that one too, eh?
Yeah. But yeah, you look at some of these things and landfill, junkyard, this very much, I mean, you can definitely see, there it is. I mean, to me, that is a dead giveaway, especially the rear. The back part of it is such a giveaway. And you can see that, that front part of it. And it
you know what it looks like?
The whole stretch. What?
You know what it looks like? It looks like there's just spray on like industrial insulation. So like if you're building a hospital or something, like certain floors, like entire ceilings, yeah. Like it sprays on with the thing that like sticks, and that's exactly what it looks like.
That's not the only car in that photo.
There's several.
Full of them. There's more down. I just pulled the one up to show. Right? There's all kinds of stuff.
But also appreciate that this is kind of a historical record of how our understanding of these planets has changed over time.
And the observers ought to be gathering much more data of the sort that we get. But I think they're all a little scared because it's an unpopular subject. They're worried about their jobs and they're worried about getting moving on up the ladder,
Turns out 50 years later was an overestimate. So much of what we thought we knew about TRAPPIST-1 just changed. which means Robert had to go back to the drawing board and quickly redo the artwork for these exoplanets.
One of the frightening things, I think, for conventional astronomers is to accept the fact or to realize that these intrinsic redshifts for the quasars and peculiar galaxies and so forth, active galaxies, means that a lot of the things which we thought were out of great distance in the universe are very much closer in.
Pero bueno, eso es la teoría.
If you can translate, Antonio.
He's saying, according to Stellarium, that we shouldn't see these stars. We should maybe see the top one. The others, he named them, are under the horizon. So we shouldn't be seeing these, according to Stellarium.
Exactly. And of course, he goes to the location, which is this mountain, 1,900 meters up there. And he started to make all the location. He showed all the compass situation, blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to just go forward. He see the red line is the horizon, visible horizon. And at the end of the video, he shows, let me just go a little forward. He put some heliocentric extra data there. But when he goes, if you go to the end of the video, he showed the, let me just, the complete cross situation here. This one, completely. Above the horizon. 25 degrees north.
Can I play the Glober devil's advocate and say,
of course,
oh, standard refraction, bruh.
Exactly. I know
Ira, this also reminds me of
man. It's standard refraction.
Yeah, that's what it is, standard refraction. This reminds me of that video that you sent us a long time ago, before we really started talking a lot, of the pilot that took the footage going from
San Pablo, Zurich to San Paulo.
Yeah, Zurich to San Pablo. That's right. I mean, that absolutely was a globe killer, and this is too. This is too. It's amazing. Yeah. When are they going to stop denying it? You know?
I don't know.
If a 165-pound man with an 80-pound backpack on the moon weighed about 40 pounds and 1/6 gravity, this proves that white men can't jump on the moon either.
Robert described the changes during a Facebook Live event, and for him, density was a game changer.
For astronomers, we literally know of thousands of exoplanets, but these are the only 7 that we have precise measurements of the mass, and from that, the density. And density, for astronomers, is incredibly important because that's the first step to deciding what they're actually made of.
All right, then they say, in general, we don't know how such magnetic fields are generated, nor how these large-scale magnetic fields affect galaxy formation and evolution, which, of course, I know how they are. I get it. And that, again, that's when you bring it back to, something a little bit more local. So then they say, understanding the role that magnetic fields play in the evolution of galaxies and their environment is a fundamental question in astronomy that remains to be answered. Of course, Jane Kaczmarek, University of Sydney. So
for astronomers, it's incredibly important because that's the first step to deciding what they're actually made of.
Plasma is commonly referred to as a gas whose constituent atoms have been split into electrons and ions, which move independently of each other. Well over 99% of the visible universe is composed of plasma, including the Earth's ionosphere.
One thing I want to comment about that is, in order for there to be gas then in a supposed perfect vacuum, I'm not even sure where they come up with that, because it would be immediately drained off into the vacuum itself. It would be dispersed everywhere, and there would be no place for these electrical currents to be taking place. So my point here is that, even though NASA is saying that, now they're finally saying, in stark contrast to themselves, that there are these electrical currents, and of course, what do electrical currents produce but magnetic fields? But they're saying that the catalyst for this is plasma, and plasma requires a gas, which it requires it to be charged. Now, the problem with that, again, is you run into all kinds of problems with gas dispersion throughout free space and all this stuff. But like Iru was just talking about earlier, yes, in the upper atmosphere there are all kinds of gases, and the reason that they're there is because they are not allowed to escape, because there is some sort of a lid, if you will, over the flat Earth, whether it's a firmament, a dome, whatever, or electromagnetic in property, or crystalline, whatever. It's because it is a closed system, and what NASA is calling this plasma is only even possible in a closed system, because again, when you think about the idea of a gas in a perfect vacuum, that's just nonsense. It doesn't make any sense at all, because it would disperse all over the place. So what they're actually seeing is they're seeing these electrical manifestations that are indeed propagating through plasma, but it's not thousands of light years away. This is a very, very local phenomenon. And again, if we weren't in a contained system, we would not be able to keep these gases there. They would be literally sucked off, or blown off, I should say, by any pressure out into the far reaches of space. So I just wanted to say that, but the bottom line is that the cosmology of the Earth is very definitely being looked at in a very different way, in that they are understanding that gravity just doesn't cut it. When they try to apply the Newtonian or Einsteinian model of gravity to deep space, it doesn't add up, and that's why they have to constantly make up things like dark matter and all kinds of weird things like black holes and stuff like that. Whereas again, if you simply bring this idea of the electric universe and you put a lid on our construct, where we can actually have these gases in the upper layers of the atmosphere without them being blown off into space, then all of a sudden this makes a whole lot more sense. Then you can have plasma, then you can have charges going through the plasma. This is what gives us the clear indication of electromagnetic lines of force that they are measuring in abundance. Every university in the world is measuring these, in stark contrast to NASA's BS statement that they're not there. So that's all I'm saying, is that yes, they're so close to being on the right track, but somebody really needs to ask the question at NASA, or not just NASA, because we know they're BS, and we also know NASA knows the answer to this, but people need to start asking the question, is how are the gases able to form in clouds or be together in clouds? And if they talk about certain gas clouds that are up there, and what exactly is keeping them together? Is it supposed to be gravity? And when the current passes through them, shouldn't that disperse the gravity or actually burn up the gas or do something with it? Why would it remain in a static form? That doesn't make any sense. So these are the kind of questions that I think eventually even the guys at Thunderbolts Project are going to start asking about this model. And what Iro has explained here about these specific gases, the oh crap, I forgot the gas he was talking about, but anyway, but that acts as a natural dielectric. These are exactly the kind of things that we need to create the electrical construct and plasma construct in our skies, that will give us then our luminaries, our stars, and a lot of the phenomenon, the lights in the sky that we see from the aurora borealis on out. So
knowing the densities changed our understanding of what the TRAPPIST-1 planets looked like. For instance, back in 2017, scientists thought planet D was rocky, but it turns out it has the lowest density of the 7. Scientists thought planet D was rocky, but it turns out it has the lowest density of the 7.
And then if we add on the Tycho image, which is that, and you would say that's kind of in the right place. Would you agree with that? Okay, give or take 10-20 miles. Right, so we can see down here at the bottom the eye elevation, 75 miles, 47 miles. That's the eye elevation. It's down here. I don't know if you can see that. Bottom right hand corner.
So if we come back up, okay, that's and then we're 111 miles high. Okay, that's what we observe in the sky. We can see Tycho's crater. You know, you can zoom straight into it and see it very clearly. Okay, so if we come back and we'll say about 500, it's 551 miles high. Okay, now remember, the moon is over 200 and I think it's 238,000 miles. We'll check that in a second. So that's 551 miles high. Let's take it back to 1,000 miles high. So we're 1,133 miles high. Okay, I'm going to turn off the red ring because yeah, you can see that it's just kind of gets in the way. So we'll turn off the red ring, but you can still see Tycho's crater. Okay, and we're only 1,000 now. We've got 237,000 miles to go. You can see where I'm going with this. So let's take it all the way back to, wow, should we go 10,000? Oh, there's 11,000. 11,000 miles high, and we can just see Tycho's crater. That's not kind of what we observe, is it? I mean, we kind of observe Tycho's crater to be quite big. Okay, this is what we observe. Now, and this is what we get. And this is what we observe. And this is what we get. You see the problem? Okay, well that's only 11,000 miles high. Let's go back a bit more. Not sure how far more we can go back. Oh, there you go. Just straighten up a little bit. Put England, and it was Devon that it was over. Devon and Somerset. So we're 30, as high as we can possibly go. 37,363 miles high. Can you see Tycho's crater? I've still got another 200,000 miles to go. Can you see what the problem is? As I say, science and math, and the pseudoscience nonsense, we've been told lies. I've got 200,000 miles to go. Can you see where the problem's going to lie if I come back even more? Okay, this is based on Google Earth. And maybe Google aren't that bright. Maybe they've made massive mistakes. But 200,000 miles worth of a mistake? I think not. I think what you're being told is lies. So if I zoom back in, you can see, we'll just about see a dot of where it is. Look at that, eh? Tycho's crater. Yeah, we're being told lies. That's all I have to say on that.
Turns out, it has the lowest density of the 7, and it's actually a water world. In
a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Despite the advanced technologies of multi-layered, computer-generated images, NASA is still unable to remove bubbles in space. Bubbles in space. This summer, get ready for the revelation so unbelievable that only the most observant, perceptive, unbiased will figure it out. Bubbles, bubbles, bubbles in space. Bubbles in Space starts today at theaters everywhere.
And for Planet E, Robert and his team thought it was a watery planet, but it's actually super rocky and has the same density as Earth, meaning Planet E is the most Earth-like planet we know yet.
And it runs into the similar problems, but there's so many catch-22s with just basic fluid dynamics. I mean, fluid dynamics 101 stuff that anybody that knows anything about how gases operate and how a vacuum and gases operate, you can't have the atmosphere adjacent to a vacuum. You can't have nebulae in the vacuum of space that are creating stars and planets allegedly. You just can't have that sort of thing in a negative pressure environment. Gases, fluids, whatever, even plasma should technically expand to fill the void of that vacuum, that negative pressure environment, which is allegedly infinite in the globe Earth theory model. And so, you can't demonstrate anywhere in nature where fluids or gases or plasma behaves like this. So why is that a staple of the globe Earth theory? I mean, it is just ridiculous to me, just absolutely ridiculous.
We are a long way from sending a spacecraft to TRAPPIST-1, without warp drive, of course, so for now, the artwork will continue to stand as our best guess.
Percy came to the same conclusion as Bill Kaysing. All the photos were faked. Both based their conclusions on shadows running in the wrong direction or running in two directions at once, indicating spotlights were used. The sun also appears to be originating from a spotlight, as there is a halo around it. There can be no halo where there is no atmosphere.
And it's like, how can you not see that you didn't film anything go to space? You didn't film anything flying in space. You filmed rockets go up in the sky and then come down. And I don't understand how there's that disconnect of where people just don't realize what proof is. It's, I kept going on and on about, David Copperfield makes cars disappear. So, somebody can have video footage of that, and you don't see us claiming that that's proof that he makes cars disappear, because we're smart enough to say, no, that's not happening. And people have just lost that ability to, if I film something in the sky, then whatever they tell me is happening after that must be true. It's like, where did that kind of thing become proof?
But using that logic, you should be able to go to a large cave with a sword and film yourself going into the cave, and then film yourself coming out of the cave, and that should be proof that you slayed the dragon.
Absolutely. Yep. No questions either. How dare you question my evidence?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, you can see me holding a sword.
I came out of the cave. I mean, what do you think I hid in the side of it? Come on.
Launch ready. Take one.
There they go. They're cleared to separate.
Power. Launch ready. Take one.
There they go. They're cleared to separate.
Power. Launch ready.
There they go. They're cleared to separate.
Power. Launch ready.
There they go. They have separation. This was the very first time it flew by itself. It was launched from atop a 747 jumbo jet at about 21,000 feet. Flew 33 miles, took a bit over 5 minutes and came into a safe landing here. There were no engines on board. It was a glider, acted like a glider, was flown like a glider, and was a successful glider.
Congratulations, it was a beautiful flight.
There were no engines on board. It was a glider, acted like a glider, was flown like a glider, and was a successful glider.
Congratulations, it was a beautiful flight.
So no jet engines here either. We don't hear jet engine as he glides until we see or we hear actually jets flying around in the background. So there's no jet engines. This is not a conspiracy hoax. If it has a jet engine, why does it need a parachute to slow itself down?
Alright, now it's getting a little brighter outside. Yeah. Can't believe they give it down to the second like that. It's 0.1 down there, guys. So you're starting to feel just the effects of G. 0.1 on the meter.
Make it shake again. It makes the footage look more authentic.
My arms are already starting to sag. Oh, bummer. I can actually feel my seat. Down in my seat now. Yeah, I feel it too. Yeah, but something else might start to sag too.
I've got it all here. The exclusive video, the photos. This is gonna give the space program fantastic PR.
My arms are already starting to sag. Oh, bummer. I can actually feel my seat. Down in my seat now. Yeah, I feel it too. Yeah, but something else might start to sag too. Just the effects of G. 0.1 on the meter.
Make it shake again. It makes the footage look more authentic.
Shuttles having jet engines debunked, and be blessed in Jesus' name. The shuttle has a jet engine, and it sure did sound like one.
Make it shake again. It makes the footage look more authentic.
The thing that really caught me about the launches and the returns is the jet, of course, or the original rocket, as always, within 1.5 minutes was completely horizontal. I don't care. You can look at every single amateur video feed. You can look at the official video feed. All of them, within 90 seconds from liftoff, that rocket was horizontal, straight up. Okay.
Years I became a believer in the firmament, and I believe this is pretty much proof that there is something keeping us from reaching. See, hits the firmament and falls. Do that one more time. It reaches altitude, hits the firmament, boom, starts curving, turns around and falls.
It's a phenomenon I've been looking at recently.
Elves and sprites. Elves is a massive plasma discharge shaped at a 400-kilometer halo. I mean, what could cause a plasma discharge to flatten itself to a wide halo and dissipate in like a millisecond? Maybe something solid and transparent.
And then here you have the wavy lines. That's obviously a manipulation, like Adobe After Effects or some kind of a digital manipulation to make it look like there's heat on the pad or something. But it's actually waving the frame of the picture, which tells you it's a digital overlay that was used. Effect. Okay, the light comes from behind the middle, and then look, even the letters are wavy. Okay, the light comes from behind the middle, and then look, letters are wavy.
You can tell it's real because it looks so fake, honestly.
And did you know that steam burns? And did you know that rocket exhaust makes steam all the way up to fake space? Look, if it were producing thrust, would that steam just float up in a leisurely way? Or the steam that's coming out of the back of the rocket, would it just hang in the air and not be pushed down? It's laid down at the rate at which the rocket is rising. How do you get thrust out of that? You know? It's like being pulled on a wagon at 5 miles an hour and you throw oranges out the back of the wagon at 5 miles an hour, so they drop straight down on the ground and you're leaving oranges behind you and you're saying, this wagon's moving because I'm throwing out the oranges. So if this is a rocket, why is the exhaust igniting at maybe 10 or 20 yards behind it? How can that produce thrust? And if it's throwing out the rocket fuel and it's not even igniting till it's that far back, what good is it? And it just looks to me like those are just regular jet engines. Hence NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory and not, you know, NASA Rocket Propulsion Laboratory, because rocket science isn't science.
Which way did it go, George? Which way did it go?
Power telemetry are nominal.
Which way did it go, George? Which way did it go?
And then look, even the letters are wavy. Why is the exhaust igniting at maybe 10 or 20 yards behind it? How can that produce thrust?
Well, I think it looks so ridiculous and impossible.
Now, when they said goodbye, I guess the virtual reality camera was cut off. And so the objects that were on the virtual reality layer, the objects that needed to be floated in space by 3D software, vanish out. I want you to notice the hull, the other camera, the stage prop, the hull of the ISS stays perfectly in focus. If this had been a compression error from the ISS, the whole video would have washed out. But only the virtual reality layer gets washed out here. Also note, you can see the green screen behind the guy right about here. When he's there, it is, the green screen right there behind him starts to show, and then they cut to mission control.
This is what Antonio's talking about. How could the sun be hitting the Earth here and not the car?
And later, there's a point where it's a crescent, where if you look at the left of the globe, the gibbous portion is there. That's the missing limb of the globe. So the light is coming from the top right, and the car is illuminated like it is right now. It's like, okay.
It makes absolutely no sense. You're right, and of course, but of course, this, you know, according to the chemist, this is because there's no particulates up there, so that's why it's all lit different like this.
Oh boy.
Yes, cars don't behave, colors don't behave the same way. That was what they said, huh?
No, right. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so let's jump into this. And
so, you know, with this tracker, when you look at the ISS and you realize how far. You can see it there, but then right there it disappears. So all that backside of the Earth, you shouldn't be able to see it because there's no sun hitting it. So now I'm going to go to this N2YO and go ISS will cross your sky. And I just want to show you something here. So this lists all the passes, and you can go to all passes or you can go to visible passes. And I want to just show people something. If I go to visible passes, so these are just the visible ones from my location, I want to show you, look at these times, and you'll see that we'll start down here at 20, so that's 8 o'clock in the evening, and then we'll look for 21. That's 9:30. Now we'll look for 22. That's 10:30. Now let's look for 23. There's 23, 24. That's 11:30. Let's look for 12:30. So 00. There's 00:17. Let's look for 1:30. We got. Do I see a 1? 1:19. Let's look for 2 o'clock. We've got 2:40. Let's look for 3 o'clock. We've got 3:24. Let's look for 4 o'clock. We've got 4:34, 5:35. So that means that I can see the ISS at any time at night.
These are supposed to be visible passes, Jared?
Yep, those are only visible.
That's impossible.
You got it right.
Yeah, that's impossible.
Yep, absolutely impossible.
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah,
we just looked at that's from 8 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock in the morning, meaning that I can see the ISS. And this is just in the next the next to the 23rd. So the next 10 days, I can see the ISS pass over me at any time of night between 8 o'clock at night and 6 in the morning, which is impossible.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, totally. Supposedly the ISS is about 400 kilometers up there, so the light of the sun is not
but again,
hitting the
right.
ISS.
But if you look at the flat Earth map and you realize that we're getting close to June when you're going to have the sun at its innermost path, so it's the closest it would get to me, who's in Central California, then you can start to see that as the ISS goes around, that the sun, even though it may be on the other side of the North Pole, can still illuminate the ISS. And that's why we can see it. And if it were a globe, what we just described right here is absolutely impossible. It cannot happen on a globe, period. I dare any heliocentrist or whatever to tell me the reason why at 3 o'clock, at 2 o'clock, at 4 o'clock, at 6 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, you name it, why I would be able to see the ISS when it's a globe. A globe blocks it completely. Whereas, again, you guys always talk about what's predictions. Well, I predict that based on the flat Earth map, that I would be able to see it at any time as we got close to May and June, and that's what it looks like happening. So,
yep, but it just makes you wonder, what is it we're seeing up there?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's always intrigued me.
Do you hear me?
Yes, sir. We have you loud and clear.
Who's ready to go to Mars up there?
We are absolutely ready to go to Mars. It's going to be a fantastic...
Amazing. What an amazing cheat.
Amazing. What an amazing cheat. Amazing.
We want to take a lot of care to make sure we don't oversell the part of the story that isn't actually the story.
Okay, here we go. Hello, Commander Fisher and Commander Whitson and Colonel Fisher. It is an honor for all of us and those online to join you and all of your colleagues at NASA in the first ever live 4K stream from space. What is the ISS position in orbit right now? "11 seconds.
Well, we're just passing over Baja, California, and we're heading in an arc over North America. By the time we finish talking, we'll be over Central Africa."
Wow. Amazing, amazing. Before we learn more about NASA's
Central Africa.
Wow. Amazing, amazing.
Central Africa.
Wow. Amazing, amazing. Use of Live 4K, I'd like to share about Peggy's exciting achievement that was recently made on the ISS and in space. Peggy, you've made 8 spacewalks, and you recently set the record for the most days in space by an American astronaut. Congratulations. What inspired you to become an astronaut?
Actually, when I was growing up, I saw the first men walk on the moon, and I thought, wow, cool job. Of course, it didn't really become a goal of mine. It was just a dream. But when I graduated from high school, the first female astronauts were selected. And that's when it truly became a goal for me. Luckily, I had no idea how hard it would be, and I just worked really, really hard and spent a lot of years getting there, and a lot of hard work. But in the end, I got lucky, and some of that work paid off. So it's been well worth the journey, for sure.
Well, it's an inspiration to thousands of students in the United States and the entire world, so thank you so much. Now, of course, we're calling from the NAB show here in Las Vegas, where next generation broadcast and production technology comes to life. Are there any films about space that have truly inspired you?
Well, for me, it was definitely The Right Stuff.
To have the Soyuz launch, but we are anxiously awaiting and looking forward to greeting our new crewmates up here.
Well, is there any chance that your mission might be extended? And if so, what's the word on when you'll be returning? And how do you feel about spending potentially some extra weeks up there?
Yeah, so we're still waiting to hear word from all of that, and of course our Russian partners are going to let us know as soon as they have any word.
Welcome to the cupola. Ready to play a little music?
Indeed. Your scenery looks a little nicer than ours. Have you got everything you need? Do you have your trusty floating guitar pick with you? Excellent. Mine is subject to gravity. Yeah, I know. Yours matches your mission patch. Gleeks, are you guys ready to do this? Yeah! Chris, ready to go?
Yes, Ed, I'm ready.
Okay.
Let's do this.
Let's do it.
key and light the fire. We're leaving Earth today. This rocket's burning bright. We'll soon be out of sight and orbiting in space. Push back in my seat. Look out my window. There goes home. That ball of shiny blue houses everybody anybody ever knew. So sing your song, I'm listening. Out where stars are listening, I can hear your voices bouncing off the moon. If you could see our nation from the International Space Station, you know why I want to get back soon. 18,000 miles an hour, fueled by science and solar power. The ocean's racing past. At 5,000 tons, 90 minutes moon to sun. A bullet can't go half this fast. Floating from my seat, look out my window. There goes home. That brilliant ball of blue is where I'm from and also where I'm going to. So sing your song, I'm listening. Out where stars are listening, I can hear your voices bouncing off the moon. If you could see our nation from the International Space Station, you know why I wanna get back soon. All black and white just fades to gray, where the sun rises 16 times a day. You can't make out borders from up here, just a spinning ball within a tiny atmosphere. Push back in my seat, look out my window, here comes home. What once was fueled by fear now has 15 nations orbiting together here. So sing your song, I'm listening. Out where stars are listening, I can hear your voices bouncing off the moon. If you could see our nation from the International Space Station, you know why I wanna get back soon. You know why I wanna get back soon. You know why I wanna get back soon. Yeah, you know why I wanna get back soon. You know why I wanna get back soon.
We want to take a lot of care to make sure we don't oversell the part of the story that isn't actually the story.
That would explain why we're getting, you know, all the feeds that are saying that it's live. Like this one, you know, this is saying that it's live, and I have another one here that also says watch live, and of course they're not the same, and that would explain, of course, why we're seeing different scenes. So they are just looping it, and they're just false advertising here, Space and Universe Official.
Yep.
No surprise.
Yeah, because it's already over.
One of the next pieces of evidence, and this comes from originally came from a guy named Scissor Fight, and this basically all he's doing here is he's taking a screenshot of the Starman, and he is gamma correcting it. And when he does this, he's getting this kind of checkerboard pattern in the background. Now, the rebuttal to this is, of course, nonsense, because they're saying that this is a video compression artifact, which is ridiculous because the compression artifact would show, you know, in the picture itself, not when you gamma corrected it, right? And not only that, you know, to insinuate that from a live feed that they're doing a gamma correction, you know, live, that's ridiculous. And I can already hear the Glober saying, oh, yeah, that's just some sort of video artifact, except the problem is that the car in the foreground does not glitch. It does not wobble. Only the Earth is moving, and you can see the car is just sitting there stationary. So if this is not a dead to rights bust for CGI people, then I don't know what to tell you. But, you know, all you have to do is prove one little part of it fake, and obviously that has to make you realize that it's all fake. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Everything in this Falcon X, this Falcon Heavy launch was a fabrication, except, of course, for the car. As you pointed out, the car is probably the only real thing in it. And I think somebody also mentioned in the comments earlier that Elon Musk apparently admitted that. I haven't seen that, but somebody said that, so we'll just treat that as rumor for now. But obviously it's true. We've been able to figure that out just by our own analysis of it. But you know, you cannot have things like this that are completely non sequitur in an alleged live video feed. This, again, is another smoking gun proof that this is straight up a fraud. So shout out to Flatmax UK for catching this and bringing it to us. Any comments on this, guys?
Well, like Iru said, if you can tell it's CGI, it's bad CGI.
Exactly.
2, 1, ignition.
It's not a real rocket. It's the outside of a real rocket.
I'm Fraser Kane, the publisher of Universe Today. Let's look close to home, in orbit around the planet at the International Space Station. A piece of bare metal in space under constant sunlight can get as hot as 260 degrees Celsius. This is dangerous to astronauts who have to work outside the station. If they need to handle bare metal, they wrap it in special coatings or blankets to protect themselves. And yet in the shade, an object will cool down to minus 100 degrees Celsius. Astronauts can experience vast differences in temperature between the side facing the sun and the side in shadow. Their spacesuits compensate using heaters and cooling systems.
The next question from Marcia Dunn at Associated Press.
Marcia Dunn, AP. What was going through your mind? How amazed were you to see your roadster up there with Starman just cruising along with the blue planet? And how long will we be getting live views, do you think, from the car?
Well, I think it looks so ridiculous and impossible.
A piece of bare metal in space under constant sunlight can get as hot as 260 degrees Celsius.
And but we didn't really test any of those materials for, you know, is it space hardened or whatever, you know. So it just has the same seats that like a normal car has. It's just literally a normal car in space, which I kind of like the absurdity of that.
A piece of bare metal in space under constant sunlight can get as hot as 260 degrees Celsius.
But we didn't really test any of those materials for, you know, is it space hardened or whatever, you know. So it just has the same seats that like a normal car has.
He sounds like a genius, doesn't he?
In space.
Or whatever.
Or whatever.
This is how hot it is in Italy. The car is melted.
Okay, so basically what they're showing here in the audio is way down, so I'll just kind of comment over the top of it. This is what happens, obviously, to a car with the trim and interior or whatever when it's exposed to, you know, high temperatures. And beyond this, Will's going to show another place that's in London where they have this building that basically focuses heat down onto one particular spot. It acts kind of like a parabolic reflector. And it's amazing how hot it gets. In fact, they had to cordon it off because cars that were parking there were literally melting. They were turning out looking like this. And of course, it would also blister the paint as well. So yeah, so needless to say, this is point number one, that the Tesla, the paint should have blistered, among other things. We're going to get to all those other things here, but just kind of want to elaborate on this, that, you know, things cannot survive in that type of heat. And of course, we've also made the same argument about the ISS. You know, the ISS, NASA kind of brushes aside the temperature of the thermosphere because they say, well, you know, because there really isn't enough air molecules up there to provide any convective damage to it. And it's like, well, again, that's not the problem. It's the direct radiant heat, excuse me, that would absolutely cook that. I don't know if you guys remember, and maybe they still have these, but when we first got our very first microwave oven back in the 70s, it had with it what was called it was a broiler plate, a special broiler plate, and it was just basically ceramic, and it had a slab of steel inside of it. And basically what was happening is the microwave would directly radiate that steel, and it would become searing hot. And you could actually sear things in it because it didn't, you know, the microwaves don't tend to brown things very well. So they had this searing plate on there that would actually put a little bit of color to the meat and stuff if you cooked it in there. And again, this is the same thing. You cannot expose bare metal to this type of radiant heat without it getting, you know, to 500 degrees Fahrenheit at least, and maybe even more. So
it's astounding that was 90 degrees. And the temperature that's supposed to be hitting the Tesla Roadster is 260 degrees. Okay, it's a invulnerable car.
Exactly. And Will made a mistake. He put Fahrenheit in here, 260 Fahrenheit, but 260 C is 500 Fahrenheit. So, yikes. Unbelievable. And again, the fanboys are all out there. Oh, yeah, you guys, I'm sure you saw a lot of the comments. I certainly got them on Glowbusters, you know, people coming in saying, oh, flat Earth is dead. Elon Musk just put a car in space.
Yeah.
Oh, man, so sad.
We have been dead like 100 times now.
Yeah, flat Earth, it's over, it's finished.
It's over, yeah. We are all dead.
Yeah. Isn't it desperate, though, guys? Don't you see it? I see it as such a desperate move. Just like... very blatantly, obviously, a desperate move. Not for the PR, for the Tesla Roadster, but for the whole globe nonsense. It's all a PR stunt for that, for the globe. And you've, Bob, have you, and Jaron, actually, Iru, all of you, have you been looking at the chats in those live feeds and seeing how many people are saying fake versus how many people are... It's just, they're losing this hands down.
It's just literally a normal car in space.
So let's take our shot at Wolfie here. Many of you.
Oh joy!
Oh joy! Okay, so going back once again to the whole vacuum issue, and of course I told you last week I wasn't going to let this go, and I have continued to endeavor down this road, and I think that I have some very interesting factoids that I've come up with. Not the least of which is something that Chris Monk-Seeley sent me. Just today, it was this PDF, 136 pages, I haven't gone through it yet, about ultra-high vacuum science. But anyway, what I wanted to say, first of all, is, of course, when I made that statement about it was my opinion that Elon Musk's car would have blown up the tires going up on that, you know, of course everybody had to jump on it and, you know, pick the low-hanging fruit on this one. And so what Wolfie does is he goes out and he goes to an air station and basically says, okay, well, what I'm going to do is my tires are supposedly at 35 PSI and I'm going to overinflate them to double that and prove to you unequivocally that, you know, it's just nonsense and it doesn't work. Well, first of all, I have to say that Wolfie lied about double overinflating it. He only went to about 15 pounds over, but that's neither here nor there. But let's listen to a couple of things that Wolfie says, and then I will go back and show you where Wolfie went wrong. So let's see here.
In space, the pressure differential is increasing by 14.7 pounds per square inch. So we can test that very easily just by taking our normal car tire and increasing the pressure by 14.7 psi. Let's round that up to 15 psi to go even higher. And as you will see in the following demonstration, I do that with my own car. I increase the psi from 32 psi up to 47, so that's a 15 psi increase. It's simulating the pressure differential that you would experience if the tires were put into space, and as you will see very clearly, there's no explosion. So the flat earth claim that the tires on the Tesla would explode if it was put into space in a vacuum is completely incorrect.
Okay, so Wolfie's going to take the pressure and inflate it to 15 pounds over. And I apologize, I thought he was said double that, but I retract that and say, okay, so he did say 14.7 pounds over. That's great. And then he does it, and he blows up his tire here, and let's watch him do this.
So I'll just I'll increase that to...
So he's going to kick it up now and get it all over inflated. And then after he does that, he makes, of course, the statement that he has completely debunked the idea of a set of tires going to space that would experience that 14.7 psi pressure differential would not.
So we're
blow
inflating the
up
tire
tires.
to 15 psi higher than the normal operating pressure.
So he has increased the pressure. And let's see.
So there it is at 47 psi. There was no explosion. The tire is perfectly fine. Exploding tires in space, fully debunked.
Okay. So Wolfie has debunked me, fully debunked, because obviously the conditions are just the same down here as they are in space. Everybody knows that, right? The pressure differential couldn't, has to be absolutely a linear scale or whatever, and there's no difference between 14 pounds of pressure and 0 pounds versus 14 pounds and pressure of 28 pounds. And of course, what Wolfie does is he obfuscates many things. One of the things that he totally failed to include in the conditions of this, of space, is of course the temperature. All right, now
exactly.
Here's one thing that we have got to consider. Well, I started looking at tires, and it's like, gee, tires are pretty crazy, and they are pretty tough, and I will admit that. Steel belted. I don't know what their tensile strength is or anything like that. But what I did find out is that, in order to recycle tires, what a lot of these companies do is they freeze them, all right? And what they do is they freeze them with liquid nitrogen right here, and they cool the rubber down to minus 100 degrees Celsius. Okay, guys. So, for those of you in the United States, the temperature of minus 100 C equates to minus 148 degrees Fahrenheit. So what happens when they do this? Well, when they cool the rubber to this temperature, which really isn't very cold at all, minus 150 Fahrenheit, it basically makes it so rigid that they are able to shatter it into particles no more than 180 microns in size. Well, isn't that interesting? So one has to then ask themselves, you got it, what's the temperature of outer space? Okay. Well, we come to find out that space can get as cold as minus 455 degrees Fahrenheit, which is just a mere 300 degrees colder even than what they freeze tires at to shatter them into little bitty micron-sized pieces, right? So, of course, Wolfie would never include that in his debunk, right? Because obviously, even if it's just outside of Earth and it's only maybe minus 250 degrees Fahrenheit, it's still way colder than what that liquid nitrogen would be getting it to be able to do this. So can I still make the statement that the car tire would shatter? Well, I got news for you, Wolfie. It would shatter even if we didn't add any additional air, because the tire would be so unbelievably dense and frozen that the expansion of the air inside of it all, even a little bit, would shatter that thing into a billion little pieces, right? Not to mention, the overinflating, or, the fact that space is another 300 degrees colder even yet than what they recycle tires at here on Earth. So, sorry, Wolfie, you blew it again. And of course, as always, you're only looking at the side of the argument that supports your nonsense. Because, like I said, you wouldn't even have to have but a few pounds difference, and that's all it would take to absolutely annihilate that tire, and it would explode because it would be so unbelievably frozen and rigid. Okay, now.
Yeah, facts schmacks.
Yeah, facts schmacks. Wham. All right, so like I said, Wolfie is just a disinformationalist. He's just somebody he's a faceless potato. And, he just spouts nonsense most of the time, and almost every one of his claims, his counterclaims, is debunked. And yet you go to his videos, and of course he's got all his fan club as well saying, oh, gee, boom, like soundly, saying that they've really put us in our place. Well, sorry, Wolfie, I just put you in your place. You're dead wrong, and I've used your own mainstream physics to do it. Now, let's get on to the further pressing matters of this. The big question that really comes up with is going back to this particular chart, okay? Now, as I pointed out last week and a few times before, the first thing I want people to know is that as far as I know, even the Sandusky plant in Ohio, I believe, does not go beyond a high vacuum, right? So even at a high vacuum, we've got 1, 2, 3 levels of vacuum, major vacuum categories, right, that go into the negative torr, 10 to the negative 17th torr, right? And a lot of people are simply saying, well, that 14.7 psi is just that. But the problem is what I find out about torr, reading from this publication, this publication, and go ahead, Dero.
No, just a comment. Isn't a nice torr. They call everything is a torr,
Yeah.
Sorry, but all the time the Egyptians are there.
Right, and a lot of this equates more to the energy required to actually get to these lower states of torr, all right? So I was thinking about this, and I kept playing this particular clip over and over and over again, and I'm looking at it going, my God, this railroad car is made up out of, it's almost half inch, let's see, it's 7/16. Yeah, 7/16 inch steel, okay? And by the way, they're going to be upgrading these to half-inch steel, okay? So 16 inch steel is unbelievably thick. That's pretty thick. It's pretty tough. Obviously, you could put a whole lot of weight on it. But here's the answer. It's been staring me in the face the entire time. It's like, okay, if that's 16 inch steel and this is imploding like this, let's just make the assumption that this particular tank car is at sea level. All right, cool, sea level. And then let's also say that whatever the vacuum is inside of it, we know that it does not go below 0 torr because they simply cannot replicate that level of vacuum here on Earth. So it is a safe assumption then to say that the vacuum that crushed this, or the pressure differential that crushed this between the 14.7 psi external atmospheric pressure and the whatever it is on the inside vacuum torr is less than 1 atmosphere. Well, that's pretty suspicious, don't you think? That a mere 14.7 psi or less than that could actually do this to 7/16 inch steel, right? I don't think so. So then I started looking at other things, and here we have like a 55-gallon drum where they're doing the same thing, and basically it's the same technique. They put hot steam inside of it, and then they cool it off, and it causes a vacuum. And lo and behold, when they do that, boom! Look what happens. Again, assuming this is at sea level, what's done this is a pressure less than 14.7 psi. Okay? So now let's look at submarine. Okay. I was looking at submarine depth ratings, and I find it interesting that even submarines, which obviously are subject to considerably more pressure, go down to their what do they call it? Crush depth is typically around 1,000 feet or 300 meters. Now I'm sure it's plus or minus that, and I'm sure it's also classified, but 30 atmospheres, 30 bar, or 441 psi, right? Well, that's kind of interesting, and you look at that, and then I started looking at again, this was crush depth, but then I started looking at air compressors, right? And air compressors are very interesting because it turns out that a air compressor tank that will hold up to 5,000 psi is only about 1/4 of an inch thick. So again, we're sitting here looking at this going, wait a minute, this railroad car is being crushed with this super thick steel, you know, at obviously what we're perceiving is nothing more than 14.7 psi pressure differential. Well, obviously the problem with that is that there is no way that if you were to take that same railroad car and put even 28 psi on the outside of it, that it would ever crush like that. And you know, that could be demonstrated over and over and over all day long. So what that tells us is that really it is about the torque and the energy required to evacuate it. It's not just a linear thing. In other words, 14.7 psi to, you know, double that is not the same as 14.7 psi to 0. It obviously, the reason they notate this in exponents is because clearly of actually the energy that is required to evacuate this. And that energy becomes massive because look what that energy can do. That energy can crush steel like an aluminum pop can, right? So
again, it's funny that they need extremely thick and structurally solid walls for a submarine and a vacuum chamber, but for some reason, in the more powerful vacuum of outer space, you can survive in a flimsy spacesuit or the tin can known as the ISS. Sounds legit.
And let's enlist the help of a friend, Taxi. You might know her.
In this scene, Chris Hadfield bends down in order to adjust something, and you can see on the back of his shirt a couple of upticks on either side where you would expect wires to come in on either side of that harness in order to support it. Of course, they've computer graphicked out the supporting wires. You can't actually see them.
Just wondering whether you had mastered the zero gravity somersault, and if so, whether you'd give us a twirl.
This is the reason I made this little video. Just watch this.
I definitely haven't mastered it. I'll give you a trial and I'll show you just how bad it is.
That was great.
Practice makes perfect. Give me another week.
Let's see that again, slow motion. Zero gravity, they're trying to say? That is not zero gravity. This one's slowed down even more.
I'll show you just how bad it is. I'll show you just how bad it is.
The shot is so clear. Is this a hoax? Are you really in space still?
Yeah, because the air proves that you're in space.
I don't know, we're going to have to
check
do
this.
something for
Check
you.
the man with a stripy top. Look, he grabs the wire above him. Now check the man on the right. With his right arm, he grabs the wire. Did you see it? Now check in slow motion. The man on the right, look at his right arm. He's grabbing him to stabilise him. Then look at the man behind him with the stripy top on. Now he's looking up and he's grabbing the wire, look. He's looking for the wire to grab it, yeah? Check that out, he's grabbing the wire there, look. Look, he's looking up. Because he sees the wire moving about and he's grabbing it to stabilise it. Look. Now check the man on the right. With the USMC t-shirt. Check his arm. Watch this. Check his arm. Look, his arm goes to grab him, look. But he doesn't grab him, he grabs the wire. Look, there's nothing there. But he's grabbing something and it's tugging his trousers up. And then check him on the left. He looks down to see. Look, he's checking it out himself. Yeah? You wanted proof, you've just got proof there. If you don't accept this, then you are just absolutely brainwashed. This is absolute proof that they are using wires on the space station, or the fake space station.
I'll show you just how bad it is.
This particular shot just cracks me up because when I look at this supposed antenna or whatever it is on the right-hand side, or I guess it's not even an antenna because there you were looking for the antenna, but that looks like nothing more than a piece of press board on the right-hand side that's been glued together with a slight ledge piece. It almost looks like they took one of those old school desks that popped up in the front, you know, back from elementary school, took those apart and hung it on a mast and called it a piece of equipment for NASA.
Yeah, that like Marcus Allen giggled when I called that a particle board.
That's what it looks like.
The one on the other side is like school desktop or workshop desktop. You can see the glue mark on the bottom of it where it was put on there. And the Surveyor 1 actually has, it's exactly the same machine cut out like that, except it actually has solar panels on top of it.
Yeah, what exactly is that supposed to be anyway? That wooden part.
Those are supposed to be solar panels.
That's supposed to be a solar panel. And
Those
there
two
are no
things up there
cells
are
or
solar panels. There's no solar panels on there.
no, there's no cells. There's no wiring. There's nothing. I agree with you, Scott. It looks like particle board to me. That's all it looks like.
Well, there's a 1x3 down the side of it, and that.
Or
yeah,
like a desk, like an old school like desk.
workshop counter. Yeah, the other one's an old school desk or something like that.
Yeah.
God, they really lived up to their name, Homeless Tweaker Shelter. This thing could not have been more pathetic, honestly.
How many years can you look at that and not see what it is?
Exactly.
Like there's water laying right there. You can actually see where he wiped his finger across that. Right about where the arrow is.
Yeah, I see that.
Across. Okay. In the checklist, they're to photograph it, wipe their finger, and photograph it to show that there's no dirt on it anywhere except on that panoramic mirror.
I'll show you just how bad it is.
Yeah, so what's up with that on the lower right-hand picture, and Paul just moved his thing, on the second arrow, Paul, there's this like area that is rising up in the corner there. What exactly is going on there? Yeah, that's it, Paul.
That's just the panel curled up.
Okay, just coming apart at the
There's some plastic, whatever the coating is on it is peeling back.
Wow. I don't think this thing would make it as a homeless tweaker shelter, honestly.
I'll show you just how bad it is.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
So I went to investigate the LEM, that strange contraption that supposedly landed them on the moon. It never flew on Earth. Frank, it never flew on Earth. So I said, well, who invented this thing? I went to Grumman Aircraft. And they're in Bethpage, Long Island, and I said, give me all the material that showed how this was developed, what thought went into it. And so when it crashed on Earth and never flew once, I said to myself, why would the astronauts' wives let them go to the moon and test it out there? I mean, you'd have to be wacko to do that. And a funny thing happened, Frank. They told me all the paperwork had been destroyed, that all they had was some PR pieces, a couple of photos, not even photos, they had drawings. I found that incredible. You spent $30 billion to go to the moon, and all the paperwork's been flushed down the toilet. So I went to the archives in Washington, and I went to the archives at NASA, and I went to you. There's no paperwork. The man who invented the LEM should have won the Nobel Prize. His paperwork on what made him think this would work should be in every museum that NASA has, but it's nowhere. And so the taxpayers spent $30 billion, Frank, on what half the world thinks is a hoax.
My research of the last year has led me to the conclusion that not even low Earth orbit is possible, that the International Space Station is a hoax, and all manned space travel is fake. First, though, let's have a look at the International Space Station. I want to talk about some of the anomalies I see there. For the inside of the International Space Station, there are a couple of zero-gravity tricks that they use to fake it. The first is they have a complete mock-up of the International Space Station built on the inside of an airplane. and that airplane does a bunch of rises and falls. It does a upside down parabolic trajectory, and that simulates zero gravity. The other main way they simulate the zero gravity is with suspension in front of a blue screen, and they use that trick for extended periods of time, for longer than 45-second segments. But they can't move around as much. They can't do the acrobatic flips and rolls in the extended mode. So there's full motion mode where they can fully move around, and that's faked in a plane, and then there's suspended or extended mode where they're suspended by wires in front of a blue screen. They don't move around as much, but they can make the scene last for a longer period of time. The extended mode is much quieter than the full motion mode. In full motion mode, you can actually hear the sound of the jet engines, the engines of the airplane. In every single scene of full motion mode, in every segment of the International Space Station, you can hear this loud sound, the sound of the jet engines. You could argue that it's the air conditioning system. Not even an office air conditioner is that loud. And why is there a loud sound in every segment of the International Space Station? That's because no matter how soundproof you make it, you can't filter out all of the sound of the jet engines. An airplane is just too noisy. If you have a look at this scene here, you can see that when the microphone's in the middle, pointing towards the guy in the middle, you can't hear the sound of jet engines as much, but when the microphone goes to the guy on the side, you can hear the sound of jet engines a bit more. So you can't truly soundproof the inside of the airplane where they fake full motion mode. You can see in this scene from the recent National Geographic documentary Live from Space, Koichi Wakata is looking at the window there. This is full motion mode, and you can tell because of the sound of jet engines. Now have a look at their feet. There's stabilization bars, blue stabilization bars. To balance the rotation. As he moves away from there, he moves forward. And once again, he hangs on to the bar on the side with his left hand to stabilize himself.
Jelly beans, but then how to eat these in space, this is truly challenging, because as soon as I open this bag, all of these are going to want to come out. And so I'm going to have just a couple come out.
And I'm standing on the International Space Station. In a little town called York, Maine, across the United States from where we're talking to you right now.
Fraud, and it looks 100% real.
Space this morning as the International Space Crew attempted a spacewalk outside the station. Here's a live look at the astronauts. Well, I don't believe. I don't think that's. Yeah,
Where's their spacesuit?
Into the clearest water I've ever seen, and it looks like an underwater movie set. The pool is a staggering 40 feet deep, and everywhere I look are full-size replica sections of the International Space Station. I take a few minutes to explore the pool. I can see from one end to the other very clearly, meaning that the underwater visibility is over 2.
There is a new picture of a new place on Mars. And for me, at least, that's the big payoff.
Yeah, that also reminds me of what I was saying earlier in the show about Mars rotating at 500 and some odd miles per hour. But same thing with the moon, and the moon, of course, has even less than 1% atmosphere, far less. It's just a fraction of a percentage of atmosphere. So for all practical purposes, the moon has no atmosphere. So again, I'm curious. The moon is rotating at a very slow rate, and I think I may be wrong, but I think it's somewhere around 12 to 14 miles an hour, right? Which again is about the speed of a treadmill of somebody on it actually running full speed. So I have to wonder, what kind of accommodation did NASA make for these things setting down on essentially a treadmill that would be running at 12 to 14 miles an hour underneath them, because that seems to me that would be an enormous shock to those struts. But I have a feeling that they didn't even, make
Neil was driving. Everything's okay.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, as long as he had it under control.
Yeah, he had control of it.
Moving out. Clear the tower.
Roger, tower clear. Roger, Tom, you got good thrust on all engines. You're right on the money. 30 seconds. We're on the way. Stand by for mode 1, Bravo.
I mean, do you believe in magic? Do you believe this? The guys on the rocket talk as clear as can be, despite the rocket engines firing right under them.
Go.
And before the flight is 3 hours old, the
8.5 G's, you're really being pushed into the seat, and all of a sudden, it stops. You're floating. It's a lot of fun.
The crew went through the preparation process. They reported we were ready.
Yeah, my phone.
I had a tracking station make sure that all of the safety criteria had been met, and this was now okay to open up the hatch.
Okay, we're giving you a go for your EVA at this time.
Okay.
Roger, flight, let's go. Okay.
After we got the hatch open, they had stood up in the seat and they got ready to go, and we cleared him to go, and then he took and pushed off from the seat.
Okay, my feet are out. I think I'm dragging a little bit, so I don't want to fire the gun yet. Okay, I'm separating from the spacecraft.
Ed White is flying at 17,000 miles per hour, 200 miles above the Earth.
Okay, I'm out.
If the spacesuit fails, the difference in pressure will kill him instantly. the lifeline fails, he'll literally be lost in space.
The only thing to do would be to disconnect them and let them float around out there. I mean, it was, you know, these are things that's in everybody's mind. We don't have a plan. We don't have a checklist on how you kill your best friend.
As White floats in space, a glove drifts out of the capsule.
Looks like a thermal glove, Jim.
I don't even know whose glove it was. I don't know whether it was his or mine.
I feel like $1 million.
Today, those pictures are a classic. They're still overpowering today to realize, number one, it's been done, and that we did it. It blew me away.
This is the greatest experience. It's just tremendous.
Here's where I think the animators got carried away with creative license. The astronauts' helmets don't swivel. They are fixed to an airtight ring base, which is sewn to nearly 1/4 of an inch of multiply fabric, nylon, and mylar. Once pressurized, it becomes very stiff.
Hey, no one has even mentioned the speed of the craft or the curvature of the Earth yet. It's pretty crazy.
17,500 miles an hour they're both traveling, and the curvature of the Earth behind them.
Ah, never mind. Let's watch again. Whoa, watch out for that curve.
Now, interestingly enough, they leave the link there so that people can download the original photos. So when I hit download, I'm going to go straight to Photoshop, and I'm not going to do anything special. All I'm simply just going to do is increase the exposure. That's all I'm simply going to do. Now watch what happens. Are you seeing this for yourselves? Are you seeing this for yourselves, ladies and gentlemen? This is supposed to be credible information. This is supposed to be truth being given to you. This is supposed to be the evidence that we have objects that are on the lunar surface and they are capturing actual images of our own home. See, they'll keep giving you this ball earth nonsense, this marble, this pale blue dot, and they'll keep feeding it to you. The more you keep accepting it and not question what they're telling you, the more you are simply just going to stand in line and just await your orders, and you're just simply going to keep your mouth shut and not question what you're being told, and you're going to be nothing more than another fellow blind sheep. That's right, you heard me correct. You're just going to stand there and be like another blind sheep. You want to go where the crowd is, where the majority of the rest of the sheep are going. That is where you want to go. Jesus Christ, He is the good shepherd, but many will not follow Him. Many want to go where the majority is going. And guess what? The majority have bought into this stupidity of nonsense that has been fed to them by NASA. You're seeing that image for yourself. That is proof, evidence right in front of you that you are being fed with garbage and lies. Whether you accept it or whether you don't accept it, this is the facts. This is what you are being fed.
So I went to Boeing. They built the rover, that little car that they ran on the moon. And Boeing said they had no documents either. They'd all been destroyed. All been destroyed.
But we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
Guys noticing anything yet? So, as sad as this may seem, and it seems honestly very sad, and as unbelievable as it may sound, all of space is looking like a giant hoax. It's just the way it appears. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Kickstarter.com, where up and starting companies can get funded. Let's look into Kickstarter and some of their space-related activities. So all I did was go to Kickstarter. You can do it yourself. Search space and look at all of the space-related Kickstarter campaigns. You'll find what I found. Let's go through some of them. So this first one is ARKYD from Planetary Resources, which raised $1.5 million to become a public telescope to take amazing Earth photos. And we see here from the comments, is there anything I can tell my bank to get my money back? $235 is a lot of money just to lose. So the reply is to refer to update that is 7.5 months old. Got another one here saying, I've tried contacting them through all the means you list without ever getting a reply. Next one, update please. Next one says, update states possibly 2016. Next one by Steve Bucci says, come on, ARKYD, it's almost 3 years since you took my money and over 7 months since an update. I want my money back, says Paul. How about this one? Okay, good. This is Bill Nye, CEO of the Planetary Society. They're going to make a light sail, a revolutionary solar sailing spacecraft. And remember, you get rewards for doing this and little things given to you. And this person here, I agree and find it hard to believe that someone of Bill Nye's reputation would want this to continue, but it does. Basically, they're not contacting anybody. First of all, I would like to offer our sincerest apologies for running silent the past few weeks. So they got $1.2 million and can't even update people. Still waiting. I didn't receive my reward yet. Becky, they have no idea when you'll receive your rewards. I'm still awaiting mine as well. It's a date yet to be determined. How about this one? Lunar Mission 1, the most inspirational mission to the moon since Apollo landings, and your chance to reserve your place in space. They made $672,000. This guy says, Dear backers, just wanted to give you a quick update on how things are going and answer some recent questions that have been popping up. First, we want to apologize if the certificates have not gone out. Blah, 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 blah. This person, I've not received any login information either. How should I contact you? I also backed this project with $60 and received nothing. How should we contact you? How about this next one? Smithsonian Institute. They got $719,000 just to repair Neil Armstrong's spacesuit. Can they even get it right? Smithsonian? Good morning, same here, still waiting my mission patch over here in the Netherlands. Hello, I pledged $200, which was collected in November. Have yet to receive anything. Read them all. Liftport. This one here, I can't necessarily see how much it was. A couple $1,000, I'm sure. It's for space elevator science. Tanya, he won't respond. He will block you. He's a crook and a liar. Tanya, getting a message to this crook has never been an issue. The problem is getting a response. I'm kind of surprised I don't see more people sending tweets to this guy. Looks like they're even doing a bit more than what I've seen on this project so far, talking about girls sending a balloon to space. Then Justin here tells everybody how to get a hold of their Washington State CPA, the Consumer Protection Act, so that anyone can fill out the form. Let's see here. We got Justin again. Just an FYI, you can file complaints through your state and MJL's State Attorney General. A good track record is building as there have been 2 victories from AG cases against Kickstarter creators and 1 victory from the FTC. So you'll see that basically this is happening a lot over there. How about this one? A Fight for Space. It's a space program and NASA documentary by Paul Hildebrand. He had 2,916 backers pledge $105,000 just to make a documentary. You'll see here somebody asked any updates. Then we see he did post a video, and I'll show you that video here in a moment. And it saze here, copy paste from the second Kickstarter. First I was confused. A lot of people have been asking for updates recently as things have been silent. I apologize for the recent silence and will do my best to update you on what has been occurring over the past few months. Then he goes on to tell about the reason for the silence is that the production company producing the film is involved in a complex legal battle on an issue related to the Kickstarter funding. Not sure what that is all about. What I can tell you is the film is moving forward. I'm still committed to delivering on the film and all the rewards, but he hasn't been able to do it. Last month I did travel to Washington for 3 days to do additional research. He ordered 23 additional reels of film for scanning. So he's done all this work and says, I expect the film to be arriving in the next 1 to 2 weeks. Then we see the next post here. Somebody says, the backers of the second Kickstarter received an update on 8/30. Can someone let the rest of us in on it? Next person here, this is getting a bit ridiculous, don't you think? Almost 2 years overdue. By the time your documentary gets out, it probably will be outdated. So what do you know? I look around a little, and there already is another fight for space. Paul Hildebrand, 2,049 backers this time, pledged $100,000. So he just set up two, made $200,000, and says the same thing. Fight for Space is a documentary film that explores the history of the United States space program and NASA budget and the future. And I'm going to show you that video here at the end because it is horrendous. Let's see here. Somebody else talking about the same guy. Divorce proceedings, trial. Was your wife a partner in the in this business? How would it have anything to do with it? Paul, again, I think you've missed or just don't really get the appeal of Kickstarter from the backside. Even if things aren't working out well for your end of the project, can you keep us in the loop? It keeps us invested and is a big part of why we support this stuff at a risk. Saying no news even once a month is appreciated. Someone at Facebook, why not share some of that info here as well? So you'll see these people are just not even communicating with these Kickstarters. This one's Ardusat, your Arduino experiment in space. Looks like they received $106,000 from 676 backers to let people run their own space experiments. Yeah, that's going to happen. And as we see here, it's just another failed one completely. This person, I never received my $150 picture. Aren't we supposed to choose the shot we wanted? Next person, any update on the photos from the $150 pledge? It's been over 7 months since I inquired, so I thought I should drop you a note. Any update of the photos from the $150 pledge? Disappointed I never received the photos I was promised. So far, this is the only Kickstarter project I've backed that has failed to deliver. So you'll start to see here, there's some issues. With that film that guy put out for everyone, he said, sorry I haven't gotten back to you in 2 years. Here's a film that I put together so far. Personally, I don't see any issue or any reason why people would be so upset. 2 years, $200,000. Obviously, the guy's been hard at work earning that money. He recorded that 30-second film there. So now, granted, I would do anything to see just some of that footage he showed. Fake clowns at NASA, I swear. So I can't help you much more, guys. You got to reach your own conclusions here. Some people just love their fake world too much. They will never let it go. They can't. It's like their security blanket. They can't face the possibility that the Earth may be flat and motionless. No, I need to live on a ball. I need to be spinning. I need to be flying through space. It makes me feel better. There's no way I could have been lied to. Space is definitely real. I see it on TV. I see lights in the sky. I'll say it again. Prove to yourself that orbits are real. Satellites are real. That space travel is real. And you'll see. It's real, fake.
Thanks to stronger amplification of television signals by today's satellites, consumers can now receive broadcasts directly on 18-inch wide dishes. As improvements continue, these satellite receivers may become an integral part of most households, providing 400 channels of incoming television and data, as well as 1 channel of outgoing video. Communication satellites have transformed our world into a global village in less than 4 decades. Today we can pick up the phone and instantly talk to someone else almost anywhere on the planet. Or turn on our televisions and watch foreign and domestic events unfold before our eyes. International faxing, high-speed modems, and email using phone lines and satellites also allow businesses, researchers, and ordinary people to transmit data around the globe in a matter of seconds.
Real-time worldwide communications was something that didn't exist before the 1960s and the communication satellite revolution. That has changed our whole way of life. Our whole society, our economy is built upon those capabilities.
I'm saying they have hid the impossibility of space travel, the shape of the planet you live on, about pretty much everything you've ever read in science, and the age of the Earth. On top of that, pretty much your entire idea of history. So, all that being said, don't lose your mind, but satellites in space don't exist.
Oh! However, there are a lot of satellites that pass overhead in an asynchronous orbit.
Yeah, they're only 200 to 300 miles away.
That's 321.8 to 482.8 kilometers away.
Have you been able to do this?
Yeah.
The whole time we've been friends?
It's so weird. Like, I've got kind of a calculator over in this direction, and it's weird. My brain just kind of sinks into it. It's almost like finding a satellite.
Huh, okay, and if you live in a place that has a very clear sky, where, for example, you can see the Milky Way at night, all you have to do is lie in your back on a moonless night and look around carefully.
Yeah, occasionally you'll see something that looks kind of like a star, but it's moving. It's moving a little fast, too, and that's actually a satellite.
Yeah.
People claim to see satellites with the naked eye, even though they are only the size of a small bus or smaller and supposedly orbit hundreds or thousands of miles up. In reality, we all struggle to see a commercial plane relatively close to us at, 5 to 7 miles high due to the laws of perspective. We simply cannot see something that small from that far away. Now let's have a look at some low Earth orbiting objects such as the International Space Station, or ISS for short. NASA says that the ISS orbits at only 250 miles high, but that is only 1/32 of the Earth's diameter higher than the Earth itself. And imagine an ant on a basketball. Raise that ant half an inch off the ground. And now look at that ball with the ant from the opposite side of that ant and see if you can see the ant, which you can't. Then the sun can't shine its light onto the ISS during the nighttime. The Earth itself would block out that portion of the sun's light from reaching the ISS. So how can we see a reflection of sunlight off of the ISS at night? Well, we can't. Whether it's a satellite flying so far away that we can't possibly see it from Earth, or if it's the ISS flying too close to Earth so we can't see it at night, whatever it is we are seeing, that's not what we've been told.
Orbits don't exist.
Oh!
It's all pretend.
Oh!
And then to just briefly show you how they generate a picture every 10 minutes with what appears to be accurate in current weather. This is basically what they do. Now, don't take my word for it, as I always say. Go check it out for yourself. Number one, they have already created and stored transparent images of the weather over the oceans using climate simulation software, which they openly admit right here that they've done climate simulations up to the year 2095. But it's actually the year 2100 on this FTP server folder, and here's one of the images. And following some of the other images that you can find where the land masses are transparent, and they use all this simulation software to come up with the weather over the oceans. Since our weather data comes from our ground-based Doppler radar, and it's impossible to use ground-based systems to cover the entire vast oceans, so that's where the weather over the oceans comes from, their software simulations. Number 2, now for the weather over the land, the NOAA has supercomputers that take data coming in from all over the world, Doppler radar feeds, and crunch it all together and combine it with the weather simulation data over the ocean, so they come up with a complete composite weather quote-unquote map, which is then wrapped around a ball in their 3D modeling software programs, just like we've shown countless times in our previous episodes with the Earth and the planets, etc. So, then what we get are composite images like this that are created in the 3D modeling software, the current Doppler weather data over land and the simulated weather over the oceans, and it looks like this. So this particular image is on the FTP server and is date and time stamped with October 11th, 2017 at 11:05 a.m. I just chose one randomly. Notice the image shows you the weather for the whole ball and not just part of the ball that is lit by the sun at this particular time. No Terminator line or anything like that, right? Okay, now here's the kicker. Go to the other file folder, which is the images that we get to see and are told are real pictures from space. But what they've simply done is taken the weather map picture of the whole ball they created and they superimpose it over the blue marble data set, just like they said they did. So what you can see here is the final version of what we're spoon-fed and told is a picture taken by the Himawari from space, like, 10 minutes ago. This is the image from the same date and time, October 11th, 2017 at 11:05 a.m. And you can see that the weather is exactly the same. Watch it closely. There's your weather map comprised of simulated and Doppler radar being used to complete a composite image. They do this with the Discover satellite too, the epic camera from 1 million miles away, they tell us. Ridiculous. Okay. Now, also notice the final image has a Terminator line added in to try and make it look like a real picture from space, which drives a nail in the coffin of the Himawari because the weather data shows it over the whole ball completely. But they have to add a Terminator line to show the Earth only partially lit by the sun based on the time of day that the photo is allegedly taken. So if this is a real picture, how did they know where to put the clouds and weather on the part of the globe with no sunlight? It's completely dark there. It's all right here, guys. They are faking space. Hey, we all fell for it for a long time with their Doppler radar and weather simulation software building a current weather picture and wrapping it around a ball in 3D software and pasting it onto a black background like they do with all the others, adding a Terminator line and calling it a real picture from space.
Arthur C. Clarke wrote about satellites, and then before you know it, they went from science fiction to science fact. Of course, Arthur C. Clarke was a high Freemason. No surprise there. Now, I did not say that little lights can't go across the sky. They exist. I said orbiting metal expensive satellites don't exist.
Satellite, we have the ATS-3. This one is also a pathetic joke because this satellite, operated by NASA from 1967 until 2001, they claim it was in geostationary orbit, 22,000 miles. So this is in 1967, and we're supposed to believe that they magically sent a rocket flying through the vacuum of space until it reaches the magical limit of 22,000 miles, and then it stops in its tracks. And it stays there for 34 years, because even though they claim that it was operated only until 2001, supposedly it's still up there. You can actually track the satellite. It's just to the west of Central America. Here's the other very strange thing about this satellite, is they claim that it is not being used by NASA, but it is still being used by the Antarctic mission. The Palmer Station in Antarctica currently uses this satellite from 1967. And you can see here, they say this satellite is now still being used for order wire voice, this is one of the services, public telephone, and point-to-point data transfer, remote hosts / internet access. What in the world are people thinking? This satellite was launched in 1967. The internet was not even... No, I'm sorry, 1967 technology does not enable you to use the internet 34 years later. That is just ridiculous. That is a Santa Claus story. That is a pink unicorn on a rainbow story. They're claiming that they're using the internet on a satellite, from a satellite that was launched in 1967 and was decommissioned by NASA. They quit using it in 2001. Yeah, that is just insane. I don't even know what to say about that. It's just ridiculous. So, you can see right here, they say they get 2 hours minimum per day contact with this satellite. Link quality, poor to fair, variable due to the ionosphere. Let's look at the comments. Shared with South Pole and LMG, problems with multipath signals from the ocean, and the ionospheric disruptions to signal. Yeah, to the balloon, I guess. You're talking about the balloons you launch all the time. That is horrible.
It's a scam on you and on me. A scam that makes them money, makes them seem overcapable, as if launching these expensive works of technological genius is easy. A single launch of a satellite can cost $500 million.
And straight from the college campus, Dale Gardner. That is just a quick scenes of life in orbit. Our first task, of course, was to deploy Telesat. It was a nighttime deploy, and so this is a TV picture, nighttime TV picture of the deploy. Looks more or less like in the day. TV picture of the deploy looks more or less like in the day.
To build a satellite that can just track and monitor hurricanes, $290 million, and that's without the actual launch. Add $100 million or more if you want a satellite that comes with a missile warning device. Now come on, let's just think, let's use our heads. So then I was thinking, at least they get great internet service, right? So I looked that up and it says, will I have access to the internet? Yes, of course you'll have access to the internet. And it says, what is the rate of the data speed? Very slow, 2500 baud, slower than dial-up. Go satellite phones. This is where I think every one of these guys needs to go. All these liars and scammers. You'll see here in the Dish Network agreement that you are required to return all such leased equipment in good operating condition within 30 days of disconnection of your service. You are not required, however, to return the dish antenna, which shall become your property upon complete service cancellation. I wonder why they don't want their satellite dish back. Now let's read about the Communications Satellite Act of 1962. It was a very controversial act and was left very open-ended. The act was signed August 31st, 1962 by Kennedy. Let's read what the disagreement with the passing of the act was. Democratic Senator Russell B. Long of Louisiana said of the act, "When this bill first started out, I thought it was as crooked as a dog's hind leg. I am now convinced that would be a compliment. This bill is as crooked as a barrel of snakes." The American Telephone and Telegraph Company argued that using space for communications was just a modern representation of the submarine communications cables currently in use. AT&T proposed joint ownership of all the communication satellites with control based on the system facilities. Now, basically what this is saying is all these groups got together and said, let's all cheat people. Let's all screw people. You don't just get to screw them. We're all going to screw them. When we talk about the compromise that was taken in order for the legislation to pass, we see that the United States government, including the President, NASA, and the FCC, were all to maintain certain duties to monitor the communication satellites. The President was to observe every aspect of the development and operation of the satellite systems. He is also responsible for providing arrangements with foreign participation. NASA was designated as a technical advisor for the FCC and the Communications Corporation to the extent that would aid the nation. NASA was to receive reimbursement for the services it rendered. Yeah, let's give NASA more money. A little lower, we see comments on the act after passing. This is very important. The year after the act passed, President Lyndon B. Johnson reported to Congress that the act is progressing well in light of the complexities of the problem. Yet at this point, little had actually been accomplished. There had been no communication satellites launched, and only some research had been conducted to provide a path for moving forward. How could they be so expensive? It's a scam. Take a look at this house. This house is in Nebraska. It is $900,000. Do you really think a satellite that is falling around the planet should cost as many as 500 of these houses? It is a sad, sad lie. So you pay $100 a month for your DirecTV. Go ahead and try and prove satellites exist.
And the thermosphere, of course, is supposed to be 4,500 degrees. You know, that in and of itself kind of invalidates the idea that it's flying around up there, not so much because of the convective heat from the sparse air molecules, but from the radiant heat that also includes high dosages of X-ray and gamma ray radiation. The ISS is set up beautifully to be an oven, essentially, and there is simply no way that they could possibly dissipate that amount of heat off into, you know, the nothingness and the vacuum of space. So they're talking about how they're going to be showing off their new solar shield, you know, that is going to supposedly, well, it says NASA has given a sneak peek of its 2018 probe that will tough the sun. The showcase includes the Parker Solar Probe's newly fixed thermal shield. Right image shows installation, right? Okay, whatever. That can withstand temperatures of up to 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, so what? The ISS tolerates 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit. And why is it that it's only 2,500 degrees if this thing's going all the way practically to the sun, and our thermosphere heats up to as high as 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit? So I don't know exactly what their excuse is for this. But again, you know, like I said, NASA has given us the excuse with the ISS that the air molecules are so sparse that, you know, there's not enough convective heat to really affect it. And it's like, but again, that's not the problem. The problem is the radiant heat. And obviously that would be the problem here, the radiant heat, you know, being right next to the sun, because theoretically there would not be any atmosphere there short of what they call the solar wind and these the supposed particles that are coming off the sun, right? So I'm just looking at this thinking to myself, you know, big deal. 2,500, that's nothing. You know, what? Why is this even a thing when the ISS, you know, made out of, you know, Budweiser beer cans essentially, is tolerating 2,000 degrees higher than that? I don't know what to think about that. You know, they spent unbelievable amounts of money on so that they can tout this shield that protects it against a mere 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, which, like I said, is nothing, because, you know, it gets up to 4,500 in the thermosphere. So pretty crazy stuff.
You won't and you can't. So your choices are either A, trust men, because no one would ever deceive you, or B, trust your eyes and common sense. I choose to trust myself until I'm proven wrong. Not by some high school kid who says, of course satellites are real, man, you're a moron. But by actual evidence.
Now, let me take you to the Swedish Space Center. And here is the Swedish Space Center website. This is the Swedish Space Center. And as you can see, they have balloons and rockets, payloads. This is their website. This is their website. Swedes, the Swedes, okay? It's the Swedes. Here's their space center. They do balloon launches. Now let me take you to the document I downloaded from their website. Now, this is a list of balloon launches from the Esrange Space Center starting December 9th of 1982. Remember that term, SAMOS? You can read these documents for yourselves. We don't need to keep going through all this stuff together. I put a lot of this shit out for you people so that you can see this. You see they talk about weather satellite program, mapping satellite program, realignment controversy, new directions in satellite reconnaissance, okay? But let me take you to this document, which is very important, from the Swedes. This is not US oriented. I got this from a foreign country, okay? So you look at some of the launches. These are balloon launches, people. These ain't rockets. It says it. List of balloon launches. There's going to be some things here that you may see that are going to catch your eye. All right? Because I want you to look. You see the campaign, you look at the payload. All right? You got campaigns and payloads. And we're not going to go through all these codes, but you're going to see something that's going to catch your attention. All right? We're going to keep going through this. All right? Keep going through it. You're going to see something that's going to catch your attention, that's going to blow your mind. You see this, people? What does that say? Mir. That's the Mir space module. February 24th, 1997. Here goes another one. Mir. March 17th, 1997. Mir. Okay? I want you to see these things. All right? I want you to see these things. Let me take you to another one here, because there's let me hang on. Let me see. Here we go. Two more. Mir. February 18th, February 19th, 1999. Mir. It's the Mir space module, people, on a balloon. The ISS does not exist complete the way they show it on television. Here goes another one. Mir on a balloon. What they are showing you of the space station is a computer-generated image. They are not showing you the complete module put together, flying at 17,000 miles an hour. Here you go. Look at this. Support Mir. They sent up a support balloon to resupply the Mir on a balloon. On a balloon, people. Look at this. Orion. Orion payload. Look at here. Inmarsat. You want to know where your satellite phone communications come from? A balloon, people. A balloon. I'll supply this document to whoever wants it. Here we go. Inmarsat test. Balloon. If you were to take time to search every single one of these flights to match it up with a particular rocket launch that they claim this thing was on, I guarantee you, you will be able to compare it with this Swedish Esran Space Center balloon flight list. Balloon flight list. Balloons, people. That's your program. It's always been your program. Look at this. Mir short duration. Mir VLD. You got two VLD. Look at here. More Mir. This is in 2002, people. 2002. For those in Europe, you ever heard of Enviasat? Look at Enviasat. Enviasat. These things are supposed to be testing the atmosphere for particulates and, you know, for pollution control. Balloons, people. You can't come to any other conclusion. You don't have any other information to prove you were at the launch pad and you saw them put this thing inside the nose cone of a rocket. You didn't see it. You can work for NASA, you can work for the Germans, you can work for the Russians. You did not see what you thought you saw going into a nose cone of a capsule and with an unedited video stream and put on a launch pad and launched into the sky on a rocket. You didn't see that. Look at NASA. Why is NASA using the Swedish to launch a balloon for them? Think about that.
Now, here's what they want you to believe, and even go as far as to call it fact. They say that there's around 1,100 satellites currently in operation in orbit around the Earth, and 2,600 that are still orbiting that no longer work. And they just stay in their perfect orbit, even though they should be sucked down into the Earth, and the ones that do start to fall, well, they move the others so that they can make room for the one that's falling. It is, of course, comical. To those who have succumbed to the new world of indoctrination, it is reality. This is not for them. It's to those who still have minds and brains, because all it really takes is some thought to realize the lies.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a ton of information and a ton of evidence to show very clearly that satellites don't exist. Now, a lot of people will say, well, what about my satellite TV? How can I point at a very specific spot in the sky and get reception from that? And again, that could be that there are balloons up there, or even an array of balloons up there. And, you know, the response to that is typically, well, yeah, they're just blowing around all over the place. How would they ever remain steady? And the answer to that is no, they're not blowing around all over the place. And we've seen evidence of that from, you know, the high altitude skydiving that was done, right? The guy jumps out of the spacecraft, and there isn't even any wind present to blow his clothes, even though he's reaching supersonic speeds coming down, right? So the thing is that when you get to those altitudes, 100,000 plus feet up, it's obviously very, very still up there. So that is one way where they can actually put those balloons up there and keep them at station keeping quite easily, because there's really nothing moving them around. And even if that wasn't the case, even if it was some other possibility, there could be a geometry that they are not telling us about, in that they are ionizing the dome, if there is a dome, or, you know, for those of you that believe in the dome, and I've said many times I believe that it is there. I think there's enough evidence for it. And if so, it's likely reflecting back these microwave signals. And if they beam a signal at it and they know the geometry of the dome, then they have a pretty good idea of what it's going to be coming down at. Now, of course, a rebuttal to that is going to be, yeah, but Bob, satellites work on transponders where they have a different uplink frequency from a different downlink frequency. And yes, that's absolutely true. That would be more of a case then for them utilizing a balloon as a repeater. However, they can also bounce that uplink signal or the downlink signal off the dome as well. It would stand to reason. And we know that radio signals do bounce, and, you know, because they do things like multipath, and there's all kinds of technical terms for it. This is no secret, and it's certainly not woo-woo science. It can be bounced. In fact, look at radar. What do you think radar does? Radar is about bouncing things off of targets and returning back to a specific receive point, right? There you have it. So there's just a lot of evidence.
Well, I know it's a really hard pill to take when somebody says that satellites could be fake. But don't you find it a little suspicious that you can't find any real satellite pictures? I know it's hard to be believed, but maybe we're all being deceived. Yeah, maybe, huh? Well, if you think you've seen one up in the sky, you can't see him with the naked eye, because a satellite is about the size of a car, at least 300 miles away. You can't see that far, whatever those dots are that move in the night. I'm telling you that ain't no satellite. Welcome to the satellite hoax, just another one of them NASA jokes. You can't find me a picture of a satellite without bringing up a bunch of that CGI. Just a bunch of cartoons all over the place when I search satellites in space. Yeah, type that phrase into Google, folks. Let me welcome you to the satellite. Yeah. Now, before all of y'all start getting pissed, I ain't saying that satellites don't exist. I'm saying that it's theoretically absurd to think these devices orbit the Earth, because I've seen them hanging from big balloons. Even Google's doing it too now, man. Yeah, go check out Project Loon. And every now and then a satellite crashes, but that information never gets to the masses, because then you'll find out how these things really work. They're just on balloons, man. They don't orbit the Earth. Because once upon a time one crashed in Brazil with a balloon attached to its steel. Welcome to the satellite hoax, just another one of them NASA jokes. You can't find me a picture of satellite without bringing up a bunch of that CGI. Just a bunch of cartoons all over the place when I search satellites in space. Yeah, type that phrase into Google, folks. Let me welcome you to the satellite hoax. How can satellites be in the thermosphere when the temperature up there is way too severe? How can that type of equipment survive? How comes those satellites aren't burned alive? I'm telling you, man, it's just a pack of lies. There ain't no orbiting satellites because 99% of our communication comes from undersea cables and cell tower stations. And GPS is ground-based too, man. Go check out a system called Loran. It's a military system for navigation that uses ground towers to track your location. Are you seeing it yet? Welcome to Satellite Hoax. Just another one of them NASA jokes. You can't find me a picture of satellite without bringing up a bunch of that CGI. Just a bunch of cartoons all over the place when I search satellites in space. Yeah, type that phrase into Google, folks. Let me welcome you to the Satellite Hoax. Yeah.
Oh my God.
You see, Tesla figured out how to communicate without the need for satellites in space. It's mostly ground-based towers, you see. That's how you get your satellite TV. They've monetized what Tesla made for free with their fake satellite industry. It was Arthur C. Clarke that theorized these things, these sci-fi boxes with solar wings. Another Freemason, it's no surprise. They make science fiction and they monetize. They've stolen Tesla's technology and they get you to pay for your TV. Are you seeing it now, people? Welcome to the Satellite Hoax. Just another one of them NASA jokes. You can't find me a picture of a satellite without bringing up a bunch of that CGI. Just a bunch of cartoons all over the place when I search satellites in space. Yeah, type that phrase into Google, folks. And let me welcome you to the Satellite Hoax. Satellite Hoax. Just another one of them NASA jokes. You can't find me a picture of a satellite without bringing up a bunch of that CGI. Just a bunch of cartoons all over the place when I search satellites in space. Yeah, type that phrase into Google, folks. Let me welcome you. Let me welcome you to the Satellite Hoax. Yeah.
When you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics. I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see.
I don't remember seeing any.
The sky is a deep black when viewed from the moon, as it is when viewed from cislunar space, the space between the Earth and the moon.
And we could not see stars.
It's not a black void. I mean, it's black, but there's all kinds of little polka dots.
There's all the stars there, and the cool thing is about it, you can see it during the day.
And when you're in space and you're looking into deep space and you're on the sun side of the orbit, the sunlight washes out all the starlight, so you can't see any stars, just like here on Earth.
There's all the stars there, and the cool thing is about it, you can see it during the day.
Yeah, you can, and there's more than stars. You can see planets. You can see moons.
You see the gas. Magellan clouds of the Milky Way galaxy.
The sunlight washes out all the starlight, so you can't see any stars, just like here on Earth.
Pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
Then when you look out into deep space away from the sun, it's the darkest black you can imagine.
Pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
In like just hanging there in a vast sea of darkness, and the most frightening darkness that you could ever imagine.
Pretty much all the time you can see the stars. Pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
The
sky, of course, was black, but it had sort of a velvet sheen to it.
The biggest visual surprise was just how black the sky was. You have a brilliant sun, brighter than any sun you normally would see, even here in New Mexico. You have these extraordinarily high mountains. We were in a valley deeper than the Grand Canyon. But then you have this black sky, a sky blacker than black, as the old Vidicon expression used to be.
So there's all the stars there. And the cool thing is about it, you can see it during the day.
I've often tried to explain the difference between darkness, when you turn out the lights and it's dark in here, or blackness. Blackness is the endlessness of it all. It's hard to comprehend. It's hard to comprehend. Hard to comprehend.
As an amateur astronomer, I'm interested in knowing what astronomical objects can be seen from the ISS, given you have so many lights around you, lights and machines. Is there anywhere dark you can go on station where you can look out and really get dark adapted and see what's out there?
Yes, sort of like a little kid leaving home. Most of our glances are back towards Mother Earth, but we do have windows that face the rest of the universe. And I spent some time looking at some actually yesterday, looking at one yesterday, and remarking on actually just your question that the sky is almost white with the light of the universe, with the uncountable number of stars.
The sky is deep black.
The sky is almost white with the light of the universe, with the uncountable number of stars.
The sky is deep black.
You can't see the constellations because the sky is just so alive with stars.
The most unexpected thing, I think, was the blackness of space. Most unexpected thing, I think, was the blackness of space. When you look the opposite direction and you see how dark space is, I mean, it's the blackest black, and you realize just how small the Earth is in that blackness.
And that when I look out at the stars and I see, so many stars and planets and so many stars and planets.
The sky is almost white with the light of the universe, with the uncountable number of stars.
The sky is deep black.
You can't see the constellations because the sky is just so alive with stars.
Sky totally black, but there's no stars. And even in some pictures, the Earth is about the size of the Moon, which it should have been at least 4 times bigger. And so the people who are your critics, Frank, say that was a phony shot. Somebody should have thought of that. Anyway, I asked you on the phone, I said, where are the photos? Hundreds of them should have been taken, should have been in manuals, books, everywhere. They should have been proud of them. You said maybe in some scientific journals. You couldn't tell me the journals. That would have proven you went to the moon, Frank. But there's no stars in any NASA photos, so we can't prove it that way.
I see, I'm start to think, okay, here there is no more excuses to don't show the stars, because supposedly we can see, we are not able to see the star because the aperture of the camera, that kind of thing is not,
right.
They
don't have cameras that can automatically adjust for the aperture either, right? That,
Exactly.
NASA's just so far behind the times.
Exactly. So when they are inside here, for example, that all white screen, that is a glow effect that I use, in my birthday videos. But we're gonna live like that. But yeah, exactly. It's a transition. You take advantage from the original white compensation, but then you apply a glow on it. But for example, here is going to look the compensation of the light. Start immediately with this little open the capsule, which doesn't have any sense.
No,
because this is black. This is not any. You don't have the Earth to compensate or some other light source to compensate. But it's okay. And for example, right now, at that point, the aperture of the camera is totally open. So why we don't see the stars behind them? You know, because the compensation of the camera is lost. So
Great point.
Here at this point, we can see the blue glow on the faraway space, and we don't able to see any star. It's a shock.
Yeah, that is absolutely amazing.
Steady, and that there were very few vibrations of any sort. There's a picture of the INSAT actually being deployed from the spacecraft. You can see that the deploy went very smoothly. At the moment of deploy,
he did some extensive research on that and found that solar flares at that time were enough to fry the astronauts. So I started wondering why the astronauts' wives would allow them to go to the moon unprotected. Chromosome damage, sperm damage, cell damage would definitely be a problem when they got back, and that sent me to the U.S. Patent Office, where I found this drawing. This was a 1969 patent by a man who had studied the problem extensively. Now, that was the year we went to the moon. And in his working paper, he analyzed the problem of radiation in outer space and came to the conclusion we'd need something like this lead contraption to protect men, not only there, but around the spaceship. Or they would be fried by radiation and most likely kill, definitely periods of vomiting, and that's never talked about by NASA. And when the spaceship comes back, the lunar module comes back into Earth, we never hear about them testing it for radiation contamination or any of the tests on these men for radiation contamination. So the question is, why would they consider sending a man to the moon or to Mars now without some discussion about the protection you would need to go beyond the Van Allen radiation belt?
Anyway, he gets up to, let's get to the conclusion, shall we? It's about 11:05 in the video. I will have the link below. Here we go. What kind of wattage? Now remember, I gave NASA all the benefit of the doubt. I said they were using 2 kilowatts, if I remember, of power. And I didn't knock off anything for the air conditioning, for the pressurization of the LEM that had to be constantly going. Anything else? No loss, of course, and the wires going out and different things like that. I gave them the whole 2 kilowatts, the broadcast, or whatever their kilowatts was. I gave it to them. Let's say it's 5. I think he gives them 5 kilowatts. Well, when you do the distance and put it in, this is what you end up with. What do we got here? Hundreds, 100,000. This 5 here is the 5 millionth place. Okay? Millionth place. 5 million right there. So, 63 billion watts would be necessary to transmit that distance to the Earth. 63 billion watts.
This famous shot is filled with anomalies, including tracks on the moon surface. You can see the antenna on top of the crosshair, and the crosshair is etched into the camera. Couldn't be there. And just above this crosshair, the picture is airbrushed out. This famous rock has a Roman numeral C on it. Could not happen. And it also appears to be sculpted or paper machéed. How can you have a round rock where there's no atmosphere, wind, rain to round that rock?
Yeah, so there should be 3 dune buggies up there then.
Yeah, and this one can be identified. The 15 rover has an oil leak on the rear axle, on the rear left axle. Okay, and it keeps getting worse over time, and the oil is spraying around as the tire rotates. It's getting all over the rim, and then the dirt's sticking to it, right? And it's sitting there. On that particular picture, the one on the right, the Apollo 17 is on the right, at the top there, and you can see with the rotation of the tire, it's going up the equipment rack at the back. Half of it is covered in oil as well. And if you look at the stripe on the frame rail, and that's the first thing I saw, is the astronauts have cleaned that that stripe off, the black and white stripe. They've cleaned it off, clean as a whistle, just to bring attention to it, right? Because the rest of it's covered in oil.
Right. Looks like they just took a chassis of an old Ford Edsel up there, and it is just about as mechanically reliable too. It looks like.
Right, but it cost $10 million to make it, though. Of course.
Oh yes, of course.
Now watch here. We're going to have those waves. A body in motion tends to remain in motion unless stopped, and the only thing that could stop this soil would be atmosphere. And that right there, those waves are where it hits the atmosphere and stops, Frank. I want to know what NASA scientific principle says that that's wrong. How on the moon could it create a wave like that? The dirt should have gone all the way through in a perfect rainbow arc. Watch again. It's very important. See those waves coming back in? Waves, lines like on a graph, telltale signs that it's hitting a wall of thick atmosphere and the dust is being suspended in it. They should not be there.
This video is out there 4 hours, and the clouds are all the same all the time from 4 hours. So they what?
That's right. The clouds are the same, and also we seem to be missing places like Papua New Guinea, and there's a few continents missing, or a few countries missing as well.
Tasmania's missing. Yeah. Hey, Iru, can you just wait? Iru, can you just wait here? This is the image I was talking about earlier, where the gibbous, you can see it's on the bottom, sweeping up to the left. Yeah, that's where this Earth right now is gibbous. Okay, so from the point where the Earth is nearest the car, sweeping to the left and up. Okay, so the sun is up and to the right, but as you see, the car is not illuminated by the sun. It's not that it's and if you rewind it a minute, a few seconds, the car's completely dark. It's just I don't know why they've messed so much with the light.
Fact,
Notice the blue sky outside the window. It should be pitch black in outer space.
Water to cool the equipment and keep it operating. To conserve the electric power and cooling water, the cruise.
Now look at the white light coming in through this window. You can't have white light without atmosphere. It should be pitch black. And see the blue light coming down in the lower right-hand corner coming in from that window? And blue light coming in from this window?
But it took me about 2 days to get my feet dry, and
so I noticed this tunnel coming down from the top of the ceiling of the LEM. What could it be? This metal ring around the outside. Very important. So in Washington, I videotaped it, and you can see a box inside there that connects the probe, and it looked like it was only about 27 inches wide. So I tried to get over there and measure it, but Alan Nadell would not allow me. When I got this close, he forced the cherry picker away and said, "You cannot measure that hatch."
Alan, I wanted to get that hatch, and it's really important that I get the size of the width of that hatch, and we do have a few minutes to get it. Is there any reason why I can't?
I start to slow it down and kind of magnify it, and you can see that when these explosive bolts were triggered to launch this thing, and then that's supposed to, fly off into space, that the explosion blew these panels off, or partially blew them off. And you can see the side of the spacecraft there just kind of rippling, what looks like, to me, it looked like fabric, just kind of rippling in the wind, and what that would mean. And then you go back and look at the transcript and listen to the audio, and neither NASA nor the astronauts mention any anomalies or anything.
Right. Well, the fact that anything would be rippling in the wind would be a bit of a point of contention, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, I don't think it was supposed to be in the wind, but I mean, as a concussion type of ripple, is I assume that's what you're describing, right, Paul? From the concussion, yeah.
Yep. And then to kind of carry the thought further, then when you compare the Apollo 16 photo with Apollo 17, and you go a little bit further on the video, you can see that these 4 panels that were affected by this explosion, it looks like the Apollo 17, that those 4 panels, it's just those 4 panels have been erased. And the video here that you're seeing shows what's behind those panels. You know, wasn't just a bunch of empty space. I mean, there's looks like some pretty critical stuff there that was subject to this, this explosion that's blowing this off. You want to stop it right there. That's where, if you're comparing these 2 images, Apollo 16 on the left, obviously before the explosion, and then look at Apollo 17, it was those 4 panels that were affected, and now they're a different color.
Yeah, they're different.
So they fixed it. This is how they fixed it between before the next mission shoot.
Yep, that's incredible.
You see up on the left there, they're showing where the footprints is, where the disturbed area would be. I mean, they haven't been there before, right? All the camera settings are there. You can see that clearly. Even the dimensions of the rock and what the mineral content would be when it's split open.
Scott, who made this stuff available for public release that we're looking at?
NASA.
They weren't concerned about this? I mean,
they don't know.
It's kind of leaked out.
Everybody from NASA that was there in the 1960s is long gone.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Okay, and when the public are demanding information on NASA or on Apollo, right? They just go into the file room and pull up the archives and put it online for you.
Yeah.
They have no idea. That particular plate there, the color plate at the start of the video, shows the date and time, who the director was and who the photographer was. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. Well, even what we showed before that is in the cuff checklist, you've got the guy's name, Jones. If you go back basically a little.
Show you where he's going to stand.
Go back a little bit more there, Bob. Yeah, right there. So there on the right, you've got Jones standing. So he's obviously, the director knows where he's going to be, so he's not going to be on the shot. And then if you go and you can see his name is on the color plate, so he's the inspector. And then if you look at the dates of the color plate, look at the dates there, and then compare it to the actual Apollo 17 mission dates.
Now, all of those are online. All of those are on YouTube.
That's unbelievable. Because
see this there, November 28th, 1972.
Yeah.
Okay, now go a little bit further in the video, and you'll see what and I put in there what obviously the mission dates are.
Okay.
Start December 7th.
Week and a half prior to it, right?
Yeah.
This is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, they have literally released the information that busts them dead dates.
Yes. All of them are on YouTube for each of the missions. And just look at the raw uncut. And the color plates are on there. The other ones have been edited out. They're realigned and stuff like that. They've been edited out.
Wow.
I have a copy of all of them right back to Apollo 7, I think.
God, if I were NASA, I would be on a mission to scrub every one of these from YouTube.
They should take everything down. They should take everything they've put up down. All the 10,000 photos are exactly the same way. The only reason those sunglasses would be there would to be used on the lunar surface. Right? They're not accessible to anybody prior to that. And if you look at the payload specialists, the thousands of them that were looking for every inch, every ounce on every piece of equipment to reduce the weight of it, they wouldn't have a pocket there. They wouldn't have the sunglasses there, because when you multiply that by 3, you could be looking at 800 or 1,000 pounds of fuel at takeoff. Right?
Yeah.
That's why it's ridiculous there.
Swallow our toothpaste. Swallow our toothpaste.
We just get rid of the toothpaste in a small cup like this.
Imagine what you'll know tomorrow.
We're just trying, we're just looking for the truth, aren't we?
We're just investigating other areas, alternatives. But I found indeed that it was not this way, and that there was a great deal of hostility.
To anybody with an open mind, that should really prove the case that that quasars are associated with galaxies at much ordinary kind of redshifts, while the quasars have higher redshifts. Therefore, they must part of the redshift must be non-cosmological, not to do with the expansion of the universe.
Because I'm always thinking, if we can only be more rigorous, they will believe us. But I was wrong. I was very naive. It's got nothing to do with that.
The rolling of the Big Bang, it's largely been determined by the way people seized upon these ideas, and there's been tremendous amount of propaganda making claims that here we see everything happening and this has to be right.
The people that are in that field treat it like a religion.
And not so very objective. The reaction of the Orthodox astronomers to this idea is that it violates the Big Bang assumption, the Big Bang hypothesis, and therefore it cannot be true.
The amateurs tend to be more broad-minded than the people who have to earn their keep by being narrow-minded. I got it.
Was this worked out by somebody, or was it, did it just happen by chance? Which is really the same thing as saying, did the universe happen by chance? And I have to say, when I look at it, it doesn't look to me at all like chance.
In the end, did they have to fake it? So I'm asking you to go to your congressman, go to your senator, take this tape and show it to them and demand a public discussion on this issue.
Imagine what you'll know tomorrow.
I'll show you just how bad it is.
Whoa, watch out for that curve.